Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Yeah. How you doing? How you doing? It's Monday. Phone lines are not open. I'll say it out loud right now. Phone lines are not open. It's Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Monday, January 12th. 12 days into the new year, 353 days left. As always, we are live from the truthfunders.com studios right here in Burbank, California. Truth Funders, the #1 crowdfunding platform for paranormal films, research, expeditions, and inventions of the unknown. Truthfunders.com. You got something you need to get out there. You got a project. Truth Funders is your source. Truthfunders.com. www.truthfunders.com. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. According to Wise Frog, the word of the day is bacon undies. I don't even want to go there. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world, fighting the good fight for us, protecting our right, freedom of speech. That is the subject. Right now, the podcast. Missed any shows? Just go to jimmychurchradio.com/podcast. Subscribe. $2. Faders.org. It's free. It's fun. Become a Fadernaut today. www.faders.org. FADERS.org. That's right. It was shut down over the weekend. Fader Cinema was a huge success. Christopher Garantano, Montauk Chronicles had a great time Saturday night. Had about 80 of us squeezed into that room. It crashed. Crashed at the beginning. That was so funny. It was like, oh no, really? But it was all good. It was all good. Went off without a hitch. That was so much fun. And if you were there and you got to see Montauk Chronicles, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Totally cool. Great flick. And I just got to say, we made some new friends that night too as well that I had not hung out with before. But Fader Cinema, man, that is the place to be. What did great after we crashed, right? And it was for a moment there, but then it was all good. Method, thank you so much for pulling it off. That's all I have to say. Method is the man. There is a method to his madness. And with that, let's get this show cracking. I am ready. Today, the king of all media, Howard Stern, is 61 years old. does anybody? I remember just every single day dialing in, driving, and listening to Howard Stern every day. And now he's just an XM guy making, I don't know, $100 million a year. Does anybody listen to Howard Stern anymore? And I'm going to defer this off to Twitter right now. Does anybody listen to Howard Stern? Who listened to Howard Stern today? Who listened to Howard Stern today? I'm just wondering. I haven't listened to Howard Stern in, I'm going to guess, 10 years, 15 years. I see a big nope come in from Dan. Did anybody, Howard who, no to Howard Stern? Isn't that crazy? Do you remember what it was like? All the autograph signings and his books and the movie and the mayhem. Nope. I'm listening. I'm watching this. No. It's not 2002 anymore. Wow. How things have, it's just crazy. I have no idea. Does he still do the same thing? You know, I have no idea. Wow. Look at this. I have not gotten one yes. Wow, what a trip. That was a big contract. Huge. All right. I listened to Howard Hughes. Well done. Follows on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. At JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. Made a lot of new friends over the weekend in Fader Cinema, and it was great. We did have to lock it down. We had to lock it down. But 80 got in. 80 was the number. We hit the number, and it was just great to the bitter end. I almost, and I'm going to say this right now, and I'm watching Twitter. Did you guys want to watch the movie again? Did you guys want to just go and hit replay? I did. I didn't want the night to end. It was so much fun. And for Christopher to just hang out after the movie and just hang out in the chat room and continue to talk to everybody was just so cool, man. It was great. That was an awesome time. And there you go. So again, yeah, replay. I'm with you. That was awesome. Okay, where am I? Okay, so the king of all media, Howard Stern, is 61, and the jester of all media, Rush Limbaugh, is 64. You know, I didn't want to go, the queen of all media, so I had to think of something else. The jester. What? Who listened to Rush Limbaugh today? Nobody will admit it. Not one tweet will come in and say they listened to Rush Limbaugh today. Not that Republican, Democrat, none of that has to do with anything. It's just that dude is crazy. Frontman director Rob Zombie is 50. Very cool. We got to get Rob on the show, and I will do that. I've got to get Rob on the show. We're booked up, man, through February right now. But should we bump somebody and get Rob in here? That's a phone call away. You know what? Now that I've thought about it enough, talk to Christopher. We got to get Rob on the show. Today, also, actor Oliver Platt is 55. Love my Oliver. He's great. Our dead guy's birthday today is Joe Frazier, 1944, 2011. Don't forget, 3 of the greatest fights of all time. First one, he beat Muhammad Ali for the heavyweight title in 1971. But then after that, Ali kind of closed the door on that. Joe Frazier, 1944, 2011. Joe, if you're listening, happy birthday, brother. And which takes me to, I've already kind of done this once. See, this is my question. Spiritual Warrior today in Twitter right now said Zombie is a great, underrated. Listen, this is my Twitter question. Is Rob Zombie better as a frontman or as a director? Interesting, huh? And it's kind of funny how he has been so successful at both. Now, that's the question. Did he, with his new career as a director, did he top himself? Did he top himself? Is he a better director than he is as a frontman? Did he pull it off? That's my question. I want to know, because I got to say, when I think of Rob Zombie now, it's like the whole music thing is like a distant memory. Am I correct on this? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I like everybody's... Lisa just said, makes her head hurt to think about that. It's really true, isn't it? Status Unknown just said director. Bunko Steve says frontman. Norik says director. Interesting. Zombie is great at both. That comes in from Wise Frog. Carol Peralt just said director. Walter, the disinfo guy. Devin Ballard just came in and said director. Isn't that funny? That he actually pulled it off. I think he's a great director. And I think he might be a better director than he is a front man. And they both kind of overlap, if you think about it. Follow us on Twitter right now, at J Church Radio. You want to hashtag DMRadioNet. Come hang out in the sandbox. See what's going on here. You'll understand once you are here. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Get yourself some TweetDeck. Get that downloaded and get your columns going. Get yourself a DM radio. Get yourself an F2BQ and your own. And come hang out with us, all right? You can email throughout the show, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. That's what you want to do. Tonight on the show, Annie Jacobsen will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Also tonight, Sean Stone and Dean Ryan will be joining us. Sean Stone, son of Oliver Stone. We'll discuss what he is doing with Dean when they come in. They'll be with us at about 8:30, right after Annie. Tomorrow, Joshua Shapiro will be with us, Crystal Skulls. And then Wednesday, director Jose Escamilla will be with us. I'm going to see if we can get the lines open later on tonight. Maybe we'll open them up with Annie. You can also email throughout the show. Don't forget, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Speaking of email, Giovanni wrote me. He said, did the pics of my ugly mug and the UFO beer come through? Yes, they did, Giovanni. You're not that ugly, by the way. And hey, he sent me some pictures of UFO beer. UFO beer. I got to go taste it. I got to go check it out. Also, another email came in from Mike. He says, new listener here. Just wondering where I can download the Greg Ford broadcast. I caught the last 40 minutes or so and went to DM Radio to search the archives, but I came up short. Sampling some of your excellent broadcasts on YouTube. Really enjoyed the shock interview. Yeah, Greg Ford's not up yet. That's why you haven't found it on YouTube. You can certainly go to the podcast if you want. And that is Jimmy Church Radio /podcast. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com. And the podcast link is right there. A lot of feedback from the Greg Ford show, and I totally understand why. So if it's not up on YouTube yet, we'll have it up there in a couple of days, and maybe by the end of the week. And you can check it out there. So I wanted to read that live because I got so much email about Greg Ford and where can they go and listen to it. Right now, it's only on the podcast. And that's it. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Tonight, Annie Jacobsen will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Her new book, Operation Paperclip. Later on tonight, Sean Stone and Dean Ryan will be joining us. Tomorrow, Joshua Shapiro, Crystal Skulls. Wednesday, Jose Escamilla will be talking about his films that he's a director with Objects on the Moon. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Welcome to everybody listening all across the United States, all around the world. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Tonight, we have author Annie Jacobsen be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Her new book, Operation Paperclip. Later tonight, Stean Stone and Dean Ryan will be joining us. Tomorrow, Joshua Shapiro, Crystal Skulls. Wednesday, Jose Escamilla. Of course, Thursday is Fader Night. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Again, welcome to everybody all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, north and south, up and down, far and near. Everybody over in Europe. Look at Walter just posted his picture of my mug. His mug, my face. I got to retweet that. Can I retweet that? I'll do that real quick. All right, let's get to some news. President Barack Obama's administration admitted today it erred in failing to send a higher-ranking representative of the United States to Paris for that unity march they had on Sunday. And I'm quoting White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest. He said, "I think it's fair to say that we should have sent someone with a higher profile to be there." Yeah, very uncool. He said Obama himself would have liked to attend the march, and I'm quoting, "had the circumstances been a little different." What circumstances? Put him on a plane. But planning began Friday night, 36 hours before the event began, and there wasn't enough time for significant security work to be in place for the presidential visit. Bogus. Completely bogus. He said Obama's presence also would have meant extra restrictions on the people who were there. Again, bogus. That said, and I'm quoting, "there is no doubt that the American people in this administration stand foursquare behind our allies in France as they face down this threat." And that was evident throughout last week, end quote. All right. I'm not buying any of it. I don't get it. I know that we're behind France, and I know that we all are. I know France understands that too, but that's not the point. You know, today, isn't that what, in the very least, a vice president, throw him on the plane, get him over there? And even that's kind of a slap in the face. And I just don't get it. I don't understand why. And now that it's all over with and done, okay, I get it. But you know what? As Americans, I think we're all a little embarrassed. Obama, if he was sitting on his butt over here not doing anything, then he should have been there. Same thing. What about Kerry? You know? Anyway, moving on. I'm a little upset about it, and I think we all are. A series of tweets were sent from CENTCOM, their Twitter account, today, starting with one warning. "American soldiers, we are coming. Watch your back. ISIS," end quote. The tweet and subsequent messages posted in the moments after contain references to a group known as the Cyber Caliphate and links to documents that are purported to, and all of the documents have already been on the web, it's no big deal, no security breach there. But it's just kind of funny that somebody like that could overtake the CENTCOM Twitter account. I did go and look at it a few minutes before the show. Everything seems to be back to normal. The account was supposed to have been suspended. I didn't ever see it suspended today. It seemed like it was all active. In a statement today, CENTCOM said that its operational military networks were not compromised and there was no operational impact, promising to restore its Twitter and YouTube accounts as fast as possible. Everything is up and running right before the show. The agency added that it is considering the hack purely as a case of cyber vandalism. Meanwhile, the FBI announced it is investigating the incident. The U.S. Central Command is one of 9 unified commands in the United States military. 6 of these commands, including CENTCOM, have an area of responsibility in AOR, which is a specific geographic region of the world. CENTCOM is located between the European and Pacific combatant commands and covers 20 countries: Afghanistan, Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, United Arab Emirates, Uzbekistan, and Yemen. Interesting. Last night on the Golden Globes, I don't know if you guys caught this, Margaret Cho dressed up as a North Korean general in order to play the supposedly newest member of the Hollywood Foreign Press, faced backlash for her performance as Cho Young-ja, claiming that it was extremely racist. One Twitter user said, and I'm quoting here, "How do you make fun of North Korea via impressions without coming off as broadly racist?" End quote. Another tweeted at Cho directly, posting, quoting here, "Wow, this is some of the most racist bleep I have ever seen on TV. Didn't you fight your whole career to avoid being a stereotype?" End quote. Then someone tweeted, "WTF, Margaret Cho, 2 smart, talented female comics, add a third and give us this? Lazy, stereotypical, racist, and not even funny. What a waste." But Margaret Cho, what? They hate us because they ain't us, right? Margaret Cho is Korean. And she fired right back. She said, and I'm quoting, "I'm of mixed North-South Korean descent. You imprison, starve, and brainwash my people, and you're going to get made fun of by me." And right after that, she continued. She said, "I'm not playing the race card. I'm playing the rice card." Ba-dum-bump. The White House disclosure petition, as of today, PRG, there are less than 8,000 signatures, people, with over 92,000 needed by February 6th for the White House to respond. So I'm going to ask all of our listeners right now, go to petitions.whitehouse.gov, click on Find a Petition. The petition is the White House disclosure petition. Go. Sign it. Tweet. Get the word out. Tomorrow night, I'll have Stephen Bassett on the show. I reached out to him today. I'm sure he'll be on with us tomorrow. And we've got to get this final push done. Everybody listening to my voice, tweet, retweet. The tweets will be starting right now as I speak about it. Let's get this done. Let's get this out there far and wide. Everybody, please tweet, retweet. Get this done. Get this done. It is so important. In revenge for the Charlie Hebdo massacre, the anonymous hackers declared a war on Al-Qaeda and jihadist websites. The Belgian hackers posted a video online. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Okay, hold on. Thank you, Dan. I am retweeting now. Bam. Bam. Thank you, Whoa Whoa. I am retweeting now. Bam. Thank you. Let's get this going. I'm not playing about this. I want this done. Thank you, Space Boy. I'm retweeting your tweet. Get this done. I want this petition done. I want 100,000 signatures. Let's get this done. It's very simple. All right, where was I? I'm just watching TweetDeck. Bleep, 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 bleep. Charlie Hebdo. Anonymous, that's right. The Belgian hackers posted a video online addressed to Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and other terrorists. You should check out the video. It's hilarious. In the video, which was uploaded to the hacking group's YouTube account, a man wearing a Guy Fawkes mask, as usual, and a hood, says in a distorted French voice, "We are declaring war against you, the terrorist." That's right. In declaring cyber war against the jihadist groups, Anonymous said it would protect free speech from, I can't say these words, and the hackers expressed their disgust at the cowardly and despicable acts and offered their condolences to the families of the murdered victims and said it was now their duty to react. Disgusted and also shocked. We can't fall down. It is our responsibility to react. Expect a massive reaction from us. The hacker in the video said the group will track down and close all accounts on social networks related to suspected terrorists. As part of the hackers' war against jihadists, they have created a Twitter account and asked its followers to report Twitter accounts of suspected terrorists. The hackers have already collected more than 100 accounts on Twitter to target. The mysterious hacking group that have declared war on Al-Qaeda have previously linked to online accounts around the world aimed at targeting governments for policies of which the hackers disapprove. Speaking to the New York Daily News, Gabriella Coleman, a professor at Montreal's McGill University, said that the jihadists are a typical enemy of the hacking group. And I'm quoting here, "It is wholly unsurprising that Anonymous launched as censorship is one of the only core issues to continually garner their attention. It's not exactly clear how many members are operating in Anonymous or the identity of the figure in the video. The hackers are a capable outfit previously responsible for hacking websites belonging to government departments, companies, and large organizations. If you haven't seen the video, it's pretty crazy. And they completely and successfully shut down a bunch of websites. And you know what? I'll say this. Thank you, Ruth. I see that right there. She signed it right now. Sign it, pass it on. Sign it and pass it on. Thank you, Les. I am retweeting you. Nethead, yes, thank you. All right. I want to get this out there as quick and as fast as we can. So I will retweet everybody during the show today. All right. Thank you for that. Anyway, with when it comes to Anonymous, that's the one group you don't want to piss off. Out of everybody, that's the one. That's the one. I'm glad they're on my side. That's all I have to say. Anonymous, we like you. With that, let's take a break. Shoot me an email right now to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Thank you, Miss Michelle. I am retweeting you right now. Thank you. If I see any of this up here on Twitter, I will retweet immediately. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. WhiteHousePetitions.gov. Follow us on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. Hashtag DMRadioNet. When I come back, Annie Jacobsen will be with us. Later on, Stean Stone and Dean Ryan. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back right after this. Don't touch that mouse.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Get that petition signed right now. I've retweeted everybody all through the commercial. All right, shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @jchurchradio. Annie Jacobsen is an investigative journalist and author who writes about war, weapons, the U.S. national security, and government secrecy. Her newest book, Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America, published on February 11th this year and became an instant New York Times bestseller. Her 2011 nonfiction bestseller, Area 51, An Uncensored History of America's Top Secret Military Base, has been published in 5 languages and is being made into an AMC scripted television series with Gail Ann Hurd from The Walking Dead and Terminator, and Chris Carter from X-Files fame. Annie graduated from St. Paul's School and Princeton University, where she wrote with Joyce Carol Oates and Paul Auster, studied Greek, and served, this is my favorite part, served as captain of the Princeton's women's ice hockey team. I lost my microphone. Welcome to the program, Annie. Do you still play hockey?
Thank you so much for having me. I wish I played more hockey.
Were you good?
I need to get that slap shot back.
To be captain, I mean, you got to be good, right?
I think you do. I mean, I was tough back in the day, but the other thing I find interesting is that the place I learned how to play ice hockey in New Hampshire, where hockey was founded in America, so the legend goes. There were these 2 famous hockey players from a couple decades before me, and one was John Kerry, who's now our Secretary of State. He was a left winger. And Mueller, who is the former head of the FBI, he was the right winger.
Is that right?
So, yes. It's interesting how they kept their positions.
Yeah, they kept their positions. Mm-hmm. That is hilarious. Wow, a right winger. You know, yeah, he didn't have to change the title on his business card. He just was able to just order more, reprint. Right. So since you've been with us last, and welcome back to the program, by the way. Now Operation Paperclip is out, and how is that doing for you? Let's just cut to the chase.
What's awesome, I'm so happy to be on the show, is the paperback comes out next week, which is always fun because a lot of people like to read paperbacks more than the hardcovers. And, of course, I write very long books because there's lots of secrets to expose. And the paperback just seems lighter. And someone told me it just seems easier to read.
Is that right? Well, they're not old. Yeah. That's why. Because I need that big type. I like the hardcover book. It just feels better in my hands, and that's strange. So that's an interesting way to look at it. See, I need reading glasses if all I had was a paperback. It's the truth too. I'm not making light of it. I need big type. I need big letters. And it's sad.
Well, it's a dense book because I tell you, it's one heck of a story. I mean, my goodness, when you really look at this old sort of secret program, and when I say old, I mean going back to right at the end of the war, and you look at, the birth of the military-industrial complex and the kind of beginning of this intense government secrecy and cover-ups and, all in the name of national security and kind of protecting these odious Nazis. mean, it really makes it, certainly as I was writing and reporting the book, it really made me take a real harder look at what is, going on now, and seeing the legacy of Operation Paperclip in some of the national security programs going on today.
Is Operation Paperclip in a strange way? Is it like Area 51 Part 2? Is it just you're going to finish one book and pick up the other one and continue?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you said that, because it actually is part 2, and actually I have just completed part 3, which comes out this summer, which is about the Pentagon. The book is actually called The Pentagon's Brain. And I think the 3 work together in a sort of spooky, interesting, and somewhat terrifying way when you get to the end, because the Pentagon's brain brings you all the way up to the present. And then you can really see how this military technology has taken us, where it's taken us, and my goodness, where it's going to take us. I think that's what's really kind of stunning. And of course, it all started with the Nazis.
Sure. And one of the things about Paperclip for all of us is that it's not fiction. This really, our government really did this without malice.
It's just, it's riveting to look at some of these Nazis. I mean, we're talking about hardcore Nazis. I know I sent you before the show one of my favorite, I don't know if that's the right word, but one of the most chilling pictures that I have in my collection that I wasn't able to publish in the book because of a rights issue, but that I love to talk about, and I'm glad you got to see it, where you see General Dornberger, who became an incredible part of our rocket program, the vice president of Bell Aircraft, and, had a pass to the Pentagon and consulted on so many programs, including Operation Paperclip. He advised the Pentagon on who to hire as the decades progressed. And here's a photograph of him, standing next to Himmler, Heinrich Himmler, in charge of all the concentration camps. And the two of them are in these very sinister, long leather coats and shiny black boots, smiling. And, they're looking at the V-2 rocket. But the spooky smile on their face shows a camaraderie that it just sends a shiver up your spine, and you think, this is a guy that became, beloved in America?
Yeah, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6 or 7 faces that you can see in this picture. Every one of them has a smile. Every single one. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is one of the creepiest pictures like ever. And look at him.
It's not fair we're talking about it like this with everybody listening on the radio.
Yeah.
They need to see it. But, it was interesting. The German archive that controls it would not let me publish it, and it makes one wonder. Because the Germans are very free with most of their images.
How much trouble would I get in if we posted this on Twitter right now?
Oh my God, you can put it on Twitter.
Really?
I would do that for sure. It's just if you're going to be putting it in a situation where, in essence, it's being sold, that's really where the issue comes up.
Okay, okay, here we go.
Put it on Twitter. Then everyone will know what we're talking about, and they can see for themselves this such a spooky picture.
Okay, I've just forwarded it to my producer, and we'll have it up there on Twitter here in just a second. Now, okay. So was it Dornberger that was the actual head of Paperclip, or did he answer to somebody?
Well, the head of Paperclip was an American. I mean, it was run, believe it or not, right out of the Pentagon. The Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was in charge of Paperclip, this highly classified program. And they had their own staff and their own, bevy of workers who were actively recruiting, finding and then recruiting, if you could call it that, these Nazis after the war over to America. So the head was an American, and it followed down from there. But on the German side, they had individuals like Dornberger who became sort of de facto, consultants. I mean, after Dornberger started, Dornberger was here in the late 40s. I mean, that's what's also astonishing is these guys, I mean, von Braun was in America, months, just a few months after the surrender documents were signed. This was not like kind of everybody forgets and time passes. This was, we're talking right at the end of the war. And so by the 60s, Dornberger was kind of a public figure. I mean, he was going around the United States, as I write in the book, lecturing to the Girl Scouts. I'm not kidding about that. And sort of, having lectures at ladies' luncheons and also at these science clubs. And he was, the government very much helped him to whitewash his Nazi past and present him as this scientist along with von Braun who was, toiling away on craft, on engineering, and of course was not a militarist and kind of got, forced into creating this rocket when really all they wanted to go to the moon, and that's utter hogwash.
What was the sales pitch? I mean, there's a sales pitch somewhere where somebody has got to convince somebody that it's okay to do this, that we're not going to be there isn't going to be something in the background. The Third Reich, the Fourth Reich isn't going to come over here, that they're actually on our side of the fence now. Who is giving that sales pitch, and who thought it was a good idea?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just such an important question, and it's one I looked at really, in great detail by examining these documents in the National Archives and also all across the Bundesarchives in Germany to really understand that, because you kind of want to believe that there's one Wizard of Oz, so to speak.
Right.
But what I was fascinated by was that there's actually, let's say 5, 10 of them, and they are the heads of each of these individual military and intelligence services. And when I learned that, it was kind of like an aha moment. You realize each of these individual services, whether it's Army Air Force at the time, it later becomes the Air Force, Navy, OSS, which later becomes CIA, so on and so forth, they each have skin in the game. And they're recognizing that we've just won this war, we're going to go home, and now we need to build up our own weapons arsenal. We need to build up everything that the Nazis had and better. And that includes rockets, it includes chemical weapons, it includes biological weapons, it includes aeronautics. And who are the smartest guys in the room? The Nazis. So everyone has their individual aha moments as the Reich is collapsing and saying, I want these guys. And as you aggregate this information, as I was reporting the book, then you see how that organization at the Pentagon I was telling you about, which is called the JOA, the Joint Objectives Intelligence Agency, they start to come together and realizing, okay, now we need to organize this thing. And then Operation Paperclip becomes a bureaucracy.
Well, and certainly at some point they're running around Germany collecting as many of the V2s as they can, all the technology, the airplanes, the Messerschmitt 262, whatever it is, all this technology, atomic technology too as well, and they're packing it up and getting it over here. And at some point, I mean, the hardware only takes you so far. You need to have the guys that designed it, and you need to have the paperwork, right? And is that the way that they looked at it? Like, holy smokes, before these guys get too far away from us, we need to go and grab these scientists too.
That is exactly how it happens. And it's like when you're reading these old documents, sort of the drama comes to life in exactly what you just said, which is you kind of see some guy writing like, oh, I've got, the 32 V2s, 32 of the 100 V2s you requested. I'm paraphrasing from a real document. But wait a minute. Even better, I've got, X, Y, Z, and Q, these different scientists. And while I'm at it, they say they have friends. And then you see that cable go from, Frankfurt back to Washington, and then the cable from Washington, you start to trace like how these guys are conferring, and well, General so-and-so says it's a really bad idea, no way are we ever going to give these, guys with blood on their hands jobs. And then you hear a dissent, another opinion, which is, well, we need them. So what General so-and-so says? We're just going to, and you kind of see this slippery slope. A lot of what was really fascinating was this big discussion, I write it in the book, about, okay, well, let's compromise. Let's get them all here for just a few months. Squeeze the information from them and then send them home. And that's not what happened. It suddenly, wait a minute, they're here, they're working, they're nice. You know, they're playing nice. We're learning lots of information. How about we bring their families over? And again, then you see the bureaucracy in motion, which is suddenly you've got 1,000 German scientists, their wives, their 5 children, each family, and you have a giant, essentially, conspiracy.
And at one point, are we, okay, I'm just going to say it out loud. Are we that stupid? You know, are we that naive that we just didn't see it coming? You know, I don't know how else to put it, but it's just funny how we just let it go because it went to the next level. These guys started heading agencies. You know, they were the head of research programs, big time military money. And are we really that naive? Is that what it was, or is there something else to it?
Well, I think it's the way that a classic cover-up works. I'll give you an example. In my Area 51 book, I write about a number of scientists who were actually working with some of these Nazis, many of whom are Jewish. And the question often came up was like, well, how did that go down? You know, you can imagine being in the room. And the scientists told me, and these guys are now, 90, okay? So they actually were working side by side with some of these Nazis. You realize the concept of need to know comes in, that these scientists, American scientists, are told, meet, Arthur Rudolph here. He is one of the good Germans. And that's all you're told. And your livelihood depends on it. You're working hard. You're an upper echelon job. You're an engineer. You're a physicist. You're not really going to start questioning, wait a minute, should I look up and see if Arthur Rudolph was a member of the SS? Which he was. You're going to, and remember that there's no internet, there's no access to information in any kind of capacity that we have now. And so it was much easier to accept what one was told and press on.
What, is it like nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition? And I'm not making light of it, but in a weird way I am. It's just like we were willing to put our heads in the sand, and I say it so often, but we were willing to put our heads in the sand because we didn't want the other guys to get these scientists, so we were, willing to give them a green card, like it's like an e-pass at Disneyland. These guys were able to do whatever they want. They weren't able, they weren't locked down. They were able to go across the country as they wish and live normal lives.
Well, there's also the element of, which comes again from the documents themselves, or these journals I found from the man who was in charge, the American general at the Pentagon named General Lukes, who was in charge of the chemical weapons program for the United States. He actually loved these Nazis. I mean, he loved them, and he would, in his journals, which he left posthumously to the Army Heritage Center, you can kind of see his sort of racist undertones coming out when he's writing in his journal about what a good man Schieber is, and it says in parentheses, he worked closely with Hitler during the war, end parentheses, we had a great time and he spent the night, I mean, it's bizarre, and you're thinking, not only is this guy condoning or supporting rather the work that these guys did on a scientific level, but he's having no problem with their former colleagues and companions, even if it's Hitler himself. And that, I think, was the most surprising. When I would come across those kinds of documents, I was really, you really have to scratch your head and go, how did this work? This is a general in the Pentagon who was fighting hard against the Nazis, or certainly if he wasn't in combat himself, his country was, but just a few years prior.
Can you break it down for me? Who were the lead scientists and so forth out of the SS that ended up actually running programs?
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, there was a couple different majorly important programs that we had in the United States. We had the, the rocket program, and von Braun, Dornberger, and a really unsavory fellow named Kurt Debus. They were all at the very top of that. Debus was particularly interesting to me because he's never been kind of singled out as being a Nazi the way that von Braun and Rudolph have. And Debus, in fact, there's still to this day an award that's given out in his name. He was the first director of the JFK Space Center, the launch center down in Florida. And I found documents showing how during the war, Debus, who was a hardcore SS member, wore the SS uniform to work, not necessary, by the way, turned in a colleague, a superior, in fact, to the Gestapo for making what he considered to be disparaging marks about Hitler. And that individual, his colleague, his former German colleague, was actually thrown in prison. And when you look at these documents and you see, again, we're going back to the paperclip, how did people, how did this get by the sort of bureaucratic censors? You can see in some of the documents, one guy is saying, we cannot have this guy, Kurt Debus, over here in America. He's a hardcore, odious Nazi. They used really serious language to talk about him. And another, person in that same bureaucracy is saying, look, make it happen. We need him. And you see this repeated over and over again. I break it down in the book through these different stories of them, their personal stories, about how this is occurring on every level, whether it's the rockets, whether it's the chemical weapons, which were so important to the U.S., arsenal in the 50s, and also with biological weapons.
What was more important to us? Was it the atomic stuff, or was it all of the... you okay? You all right?
Yeah.
What was more important?
My goodness, I'm getting so upset.
Yeah, me too. I'm furious right now. With what was more important to us, the atomic side or the really dark side of experiments on humans with the biological weapons and the chemical weapons? To get into the country, who did we want first here?
Well, the atomic weapons, it was interesting because as far as is known presently, and of course any of this could change with the revelation of documents, as does happen, but as far as is known now, the German atomic scientists were pretty much shuttled off to Farm Hall, and we didn't really want to have much to do with them. We had our own program, obviously, that was far superior to the Nazi program, the atomic program. We had the atomic bomb. We were very shortly thereafter we began work on the hydrogen bomb. And as far as I understand and know and research, the Nazi scientists had nothing to do with our atomic programs after the war. The biological program was the most astounding to me, or one of them, because, now looking back through the lens of history, we are like, my God, what were we even thinking? Creating weapons with things like bubonic plague. This just seems apocryphal now because we know how dangerous it was. And yet, in the 50s, this was like the new thing. And to that end, as part of Operation Paperclip, we sought out Hitler's biological weapons maker, a man named Dr. Kurt Blomme. And Blomme was actually went on trial at Nuremberg during the doctor's trial. And he was a very smart individual, and he was acquitted through his own really crafty arguments. But he was such a hot potato because he had been at Nuremberg that, and he, by the way, was working on the bubonic plague weapon.
Well, yeah, let me stop you right there. That was he was acquitted. This man experimented on humans and developed chemical and biological weapons while testing humans, but yet he was acquitted in trial. Now, how does that happen?
Well, and I went in Germany, I interviewed Blomme's family members and looked at a lot of his personal papers, and it's a very twisted and tangled story. Dr. Blomme actually signed off on a document which I looked at where he ordered what was called Sonderbehandling. That's the German word for special treatment. and I probably don't need to tell you what that actually meant. Sonderby handling of 20,000 tubercular Poles. But and this one story I'm going to tell you kind of serves as an example of it. So you've got this document written to Himmler and about these Poles that they want to reading between the lines. It's clear that they want to exterminate. And what Dr. Bloma is saying is, well, we can't really give them special treatment because their family members will notice. This is in the early 40s, before the genocide really got going.
Right.
And so this kind of document would be presented at trial, and Bloma's defense would be, well, just because I said it was a good idea doesn't mean I did it.
And that was good enough.
So,
wow.
Go ahead.
I said, wow.
Yeah. Yep. And you see this, you can, I looked at the doctor's footage trial. I found a bunch of, sort of old, dusty film archives at Harvard, at the Harvard Law Library, where they have a lot of this. You can find things in the craziest, strangest places. It's really remarkable. And I must give a shout out to all those people that helped me, these dedicated academics who look for this stuff when asked and find it a lot of times. And I watched some footage of the doctor's trial. You see Bloma in action, and you see him defending, and you see his lawyers defending, and you can't make this stuff up. This is like judgment at Nuremberg, and you realize this man is brilliant in that twisted, evil way, and he's able to argue his way out of a death sentence, and that's exactly what he did. And then he becomes a target for Operation Paperclip. But he was such a hot potato because of his close affiliation with Hitler and because he was the Deputy Surgeon General of the Third Reich that he couldn't be brought to America. You didn't need the internet to know about this guy because of the Nuremberg trials. And so what did the Americans do, the Americans that were part of Operation Paperclip? Well, we set up what I call sort of one of the CIA's first black sites, which they co-ran with the military, and they put Dr. Bloma as the facility doctor. And there he was working at this facility, which then became this really you cannot believe that this is actually true, that this became the original place where the MK Ultra experiments took place, and they were called Operation Bluebird.
And this is it's like the elephant in the room. I'm just going to say this straight out and forward. Experimenting on humans when it comes to biological weapons and chemical weapons is something that we don't do here. Obviously, we're testing on animals, and that data is not the same data that you would get and acquire from, and I just want to be harsh, but I have to be harsh here, from experimenting on humans as the Nazis did, and we needed that paperwork, didn't we? And that was
absolutely we did. But here's the real conundrum is that in a situation like Bloma and why he wasn't convicted is that the paperwork that we had and that we found and that our army investigators, I write about all this in the book, tracked down and found was really specifically against Luftwaffe doctors. These are the German Air Force doctors who were absolutely conducting these horrific, murderous experiments on concentration camp prisoners. And I spared my reader some of these details, and I'm going to spare the listeners of them, but I'm going to obliquely refer to the due diligence I did as a journalist just to really know what was going on. I went to Germany. I went to Dachau. I went to the archives at the library at Dachau, where they have the actual photographs that were located, okay? And I looked at these photographs, which are essentially of people being murdered in the name of medical science. And they make your stomach turn, and you realize this is actually what they did. And so to have seen that and to know that and to have known the people involved, known them from, who they were from the documents, that becomes the sort of source of the evidence. But then you have to move a step away from it, somebody like Dr. Blum, and here's his situation. So the Dachau experiments were, the Americans gathered that evidence because Dachau was outside of Munich, was within the territory that the U.S. soldiers liberated, okay? Whereas where Dr. Blum's experiments were going on, allegedly, were in Poland, in Posen, and that's where the Soviets liberated. And so the Soviets got a hold of all of Dr. Blum's bubonic plague experiments, the animals and likely the people that were being experimented on there. And that, again, created that conundrum that you referred to, which is, wait a minute, we need Dr. Blum because the Soviets have what he was doing, and we need to know what they know.
This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are speaking with author Annie Jacobsen about her new book, Operation Paperclip. And you had mentioned earlier, and I think this is something that really needs to be talked about, probably for the first time, is the Luftwaffe and their experiments that they did do. I mean, you mentioned how dark it was, but they had so much advanced knowledge on the stress, how high a pilot can go, oxygen deprivation, G-forces on the body. And all of this was done and studied in a very dark and sinister way.
Absolutely. And it was, okay, so going back to your question, who was in charge of these programs?
Yes.
Here's just a great shame. The person that was the top doctor for the Luftwaffe was named Dr. Hubertus Strughold. And as I write in the book, he's one of the guys that became such a top figure in American space medicine that at some point, until his Nazi past was revealed and the name was taken down, the largest Air Force library in the United States was named the Dr. Hubertus Strughold Library in honor of him. So he was so important to us that we overlooked all of the work of the doctors that were below him and brought him to America and put him in charge of our space medicine program. And still to this day, any of the astronauts that I interview, they all rave about Strughold. Going back to our earlier discussion, how can we not have known? Because again, they're told Strughold was one of the good Nazis. Oh my God, he was never, one of the good Germans. He was never a Nazi. He actually had to hide out. All these myths and lies that are compounded and reiterated and said over and over again. And then, here we are, 50, 60, almost 70 years later, looking at the reality of it and realizing that was completely false. He was right at the heart of this dark-hearted program that used humans, or rather, as the Germans call them, subhumans, Untermenschen, to experiment on the way that we use rats.
Who was the scientist that was posted at Auschwitz?
Dr. Otto Ambros.
Yes.
Ambros was a chemist. He was Hitler's most valuable chemist, co-discoverer of sarin gas. So the A in sarin stands for Ambros. And he was chief of the Reich's Committee for Chemical Warfare. He was so important to Hitler that he was given a 1 million Reichsmarks bonus during the war. He also ran the slave labor part of Auschwitz, which was called Buna, which is where his company, IG Farben, was manufacturing or attempting to manufacture rubber for the Reich. And, tens of thousands of people died at Buna. I interview some of the survivors and tell their stories in the book. Otto Ambros was actually convicted at Nuremberg. And yet, when he was given clemency by the U.S. High Commissioner for Germany, John McCloy, what do you think happened to him?
He went to Denmark.
he sadly not. He became someone that would consult for Operation Paperclip.
And
this was a convicted Nazi war criminal.
When the Nazis...
We know he came to America.
The Nazis ran out of rubber, and they he was the guy that invented synthetic rubber to keep the war machine running.
You bet. I mean, think of how important. Imagine your rubber supply gets cut off after you invade Poland.
Right.
What are you going to do? You need rubber, and you've got Otto Ambros. He's no wonder Hitler gave him $1 million Reichsmarks bonus.
How much is that in today's money, by the way?
You know, that's such a good question. All of my different German colleagues who were trying to help me do this conversion, it's like a weird. I don't want to answer that question, and I really honestly don't understand why. But it's always said, well, it can't really be converted, and then they usually give me an example. This is how much a Porsche cost then, and this is how much a Porsche costs now. And you could buy like 16, or maybe it's 1,600 Porsches with it. I mean, it's just an astonishing amount of money.
Like $1 million. It's like $1 million.
More.
Yeah, exactly.
More. Like $1 million would have been in, 1940.
It's such a.
But what was crazy about that is, I found that document at sort of dusty, with its rusty paperclip still on it, literally, at the National Archives, and I don't believe that had ever been reported before. That Otto Ambros was given this $1 million Reichsmarks bonus. And what was incredible to me is that after, when these guys were convicted at Nuremberg, the Nuremberg judges took away their money because they said this is all war booty. So these big industrialists and whatnot who were all, convicted at Nuremberg, stripped of their cash. But then when they were later given clemency by McCloy and released, their finances were restored to them.
Well,
so their money was given back.
You write a lot about McCloy. What can you tell us about him in the New World Order?
I mean, he's such a shadowy figure, and so many people link him today to the Illuminati and the New World Order, which is just such an interesting topic. And I don't really know what I really think of it, but I certainly think it's worth thinking about. But McCloy championed the Nazi scientist program from its very first days in May of 1945. He was a player inside the War Department. He went on to be the president of the World Bank, and then he accepted the position as the U.S. High Commissioner for Germany, which was kind of like, the governor of Germany, or rather the president of Germany, because we didn't allow Germany to rule itself or to govern itself until we did. And McCloy is, his ideas he sort of seems to be at the center of an awful lot of really sinister ideas, including, this formerly fabled story, which is now well documented, that he made a decision not to bomb the rail lines going into Auschwitz in 1944, and I write about that in the book. So the suggestion that many people have is that McCloy was this huge anti-Semite and that he was looking to move power in a sort of quasi-government way, which is, I think, how we wind up a lot about that idea that he's kind of the major player behind the New World Order.
Well, what about Japan and their experiments also on humans and biological weapons? Was there a connection to Germany, and did any of that get involved into rolled into Operation Paperclip?
That's such an interesting question. I mean, of course, the Japanese did those horrific human experiments with biological weapons. There's some interesting books written about that, about Unit 731, I believe. Right. But the direct paperclip link that I found fascinating was, when Germany finally surrendered, they called back all their submarines, and there was one submarine that was halfway to Japan, essentially, and it was sort of like off the coast of Maine. And I write about this in the book. So the Coast Guard goes after it, it surfaces, and we grab the Nazi commanders off of it, and it's all very dramatic, and it's reported in the New York Times and everywhere else. But what wasn't reported was that also on that submarine were two Nazi scientists who would later become part of Paperclip, who were and that the submarine was filled with, serious high-tech high-tech weapons, including some uranium and including a V2, and then a couple scientists who were going to teach the Japanese how to use these weapons. And that is a very interesting and largely unreported part of the story, particularly because these scientists were thrown into custody in the United States, separate from Paperclip going on over in Germany, because we were just in the early recruiting stages, and then suddenly it was like, wait a minute, we've got two guys in the United States, two Nazi scientists who we captured in this sub. We want them as part of Paperclip. But because of the way bureaucracy works, we actually had to send them back to Germany to then bring them back to Paperclip, if that makes any sense, because they were war criminals in the United States here. They needed to be liberated and then recruited. And it just puts an odd twist on all of this of how strange and cold-hearted so much of it was.
Yeah, and was tongue-tied. Were there any Japanese scientists that were brought in under the same program?
Under Paperclip, that's a great question. None that would be called Operation Paperclip. Now, we made deals with many of the Japanese, and their stories, I was just sort of reading, because you can't not read them when you're sitting there in the archives, even though it's like, okay, Annie, stay on topic. You're writing about the German scientists. But wait a minute. I have to read about General Ishii, and I found these General Ishii documents. Ishii was in charge of Unit 731, and we made a deal with him that said, tell us everything you know and we'll give you immunity. And the documents are like really brutal and gross. I mean, it's just like, oh my God. Whereas the Germans seem to have been pursuing scientific experiments, if that makes kind of a macabre sense, the Japanese, at least my read of it, were basically just like doing barbaric experiments, like, let's see what happens when, and then I don't need to tell you. But it was more like sadistic things, okay? And so one of the most horribly moving moments in my reading of the Ishii documents was the CIA officer that was sent over to get this information from Ishii, and he actually was working at the biological weapons facility with a lot of the guys who were recruiting the German scientists, including Dr. Blum. The handler of Ishii was so obviously affected by all of this that he committed suicide. He jumped out of his hotel room.
With what was going on with Paperclip and everybody coming over, especially with the rocket and our space program, Russia obviously was grabbing the same scientists from the same pool on the other side of the fence, and they beat us to space. Do you think there was some conspiracy with the Paperclip scientists on our side to let the other guys over there in the Soviet Union get there first?
Okay, do you mean could the Germans have wanted the Soviets to get into space first?
Yes.
Well, here's why I would say absolutely not. The Germans hated the Russians and vice versa. I mean, they hated each other.
Well,
think about what went on the Eastern Front.
I totally agree. Except they beat us to space, and we had all the good guys. We were supposed to have pilfered all of the best scientists.
Absolutely. Well, I think that this answers a different question, which is, did we even really need the Germans? So my take on that, having looked at the Russian space program, in a limited capacity, is that their main scientist, Korolev, I'm terrible at my Russian pronunciations here, and I also write about him in Area 51. Korolev was like this incredible rocket scientist, and he also was a real Russian at heart, and he despised the Germans. He treated their German paperclips, their equivalent of that from their project was called Oskevem, and Korolev sort of gave the Germans very second-class jobs, more engineering jobs than anything. And they got into space, before us. They had an ICBM, a long range missile, certainly before us, and that was all because of him. And so you really have to say, were the Germans so important to our space program, and would we have gotten into space without them? I'd like to think yes.
Donna Colvin just tweeted, she says, does Annie know about the North Africa labs that the Germans had? Do you know what she's referencing here?
Well, this is very interesting. She might be talking about the chemical weapon. I don't know if they were labs, but I know we captured Germans in North Africa. I write about this a little bit in the book, that were involved in the chemical weapons programs, we and the British. And they said, there's one story I write about specifically where a captured German says, we're doing these horrible, he doesn't call it horrible, but we're doing these experiments because we're looking into a poison gas that's going to kill all of you. And the British consulted with the Americans and said, what are they talking about? He was talking about taboon gas, which is kind of the forebearer of sarin gas. And, but it didn't seem to be, it didn't lead anywhere. But I don't know if that's what she means when she's talking about the laboratories. If not, I don't know, but it certainly sounds interesting.
Barrett just tweeted that the audio version of your book is narrated by you, and it's 19 hours and 26 minutes unabridged. Are you kidding? How long did how long did it take for you to do that? Oh my goodness!
I guess 19 hours and 20 minutes plus 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness!
It's but you know what? I love reading the book because I can catch any last minute errors.
Right. Sure.
In the studio there, yeah.
Oh, unbelievable! Well, you know what? Let's not get too sideways here. But so you actually narrate your own book, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because on Area 51, that book was embargoed because there was so much crazy stuff in that we didn't. I mean, the publisher didn't want the book to be shut down, for lack of a better word, by someone in the government, let's just say.
Right.
And so that book was embargoed. No advance copies went out. No one read it. It was literally in a safe at Little Brown. And so to keep everything kind of quiet and secret, so to speak, they were like, would you do the reading? And I thought, sure, why not? And then I liked it, and apparently readers liked it or listeners liked it. So then I did the reading on Paperclip, although I do have to say, I have gotten a lot of feedback from Germans that I'm a terrible German pronunciator.
Right? You can't make everybody happy.
I can't and I even had like this amazing tutor, helping me with the different words. But I tell you, it is really hard to pronounce words in in other languages.
Right.
Really,
and then plus then you start to get a complex because you've got a guy on the other side of the glass always going, you know what, can you say that again? Can you say that again?
Well, how about this one? Dr. Kurt Blum was the Deputy Surgeon General of the Reich, and this is his title in German. Reichsgesundheitsführer.
Oh, you can't say that
That's
fast.
A mouthful.
Yeah, you can't say
That's
that
fast.
That's a mouthful. This comes in from one of our producers. Actually, let's change gears a little bit because I want to talk about CENTCOM before I let you go. Mm-hmm. And this comes in from Renee. She says, congratulations on working with Chris Carter on the upcoming TV series based on Area 51. Since the book was nonfiction, will the series be nonfiction as well, or is there going to be fictionalized versions of actual events?
Fiction.
Okay.
It's all, that's just, documentaries are great, but I think, at least the fun of and the drama of TV, there's so much amazing drama, and I personally think Chris Carter is a master of drama.
Yes, he is.
So we're talking fiction.
How far along are things now since you were on the show last?
Hollywood is a different model. I know how it works in publishing. You know, you write your books and then they seem to publish with some kind of order. But I'll get back to you when I know how Hollywood works. How about that?
Okay. Well, one last question from Renee. Because she's got two more here. Will there be any characters introduced in the TV series that were not in your book? And again,
yeah. Oh my God, absolutely, most of them. There's two main characters from the book, and then everybody else is of the incredible imagination of Chris Carter.
And is there an estimated air date yet with AMC?
No.
Okay.
That's my cryptic no.
Yeah. Well, okay. Would you tell me if you knew? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
all right.
I would. I promise. I just said I will tell you when I know.
Yeah, it's tough. You just don't know. You're at the mercy of the network, and that's really it. You're the last to know. That's the bottom line. You're the last to know. Let's talk about.
And what I will tell you is that we're actually not with AMC anymore.
Oh. Okay.
There's a little mystery.
A bigger network?
Just, I'll definitely, you'll be, how about if you are the first person I tell?
I knew you were going to say that. Okay. I'll take that. That's a good answer. CENTCOM. What's your take on what's going on? And then I'll respond to it. But do you think it's ISIS? Let me ask you that. Do you think it's ISIS that took control of CENTCOM, or do you think it's a 15-year-old kid in his mother's basement?
The consequences for the 15-year-old kid in his mother's basement would be so extraordinary. I can't imagine that. And I can't. And also with Anonymous declaring war on, claiming to shut down all of ISIS's Twitter feeds and, saying they're going to give them a cyber attack. And then this seemed to me kind of like an asymmetrical chess move by ISIS. That was my take. But what I'm most fascinated by is CENTCOM, or rather the spokespeople of CENTCOM, trying to downplay that their Twitter account was somehow not important, and which is, complete rubbish. I mean, it's so important in terms of psychological warfare that it's just remarkable. And having just written a book on the Pentagon, one of the last things I did a couple months ago was read through the 500-page fiscal year 2015 budget about protecting, cybersecurity, which, by the way, our president was, everyone knows, giving a speech about this while this hack happened. I mean, the billions of dollars that are in this 500-page document denoted to different parts of cybersecurity. It's just, I can't even say it's extraordinary. There's no word to describe how unacceptable, is that the right word?
Yeah, that's the right word. Yeah. Have you been? I'm assuming you've been to the Twitter feed. Have you gone down and looked at the tweets that they actually?
Yes, I've seen. I looked at all of them. I mean, it's just, you cannot have a worse propaganda situation. You can't. You simply can't. I mean, my 15-year-old son came home from school, and the first thing that he asked me was, "Mom, did you hear CENTCOM's Twitter feed got hacked?"
When you go and you look at the tweets that they send out on CENTCOM, it's one bombing run after another, all the video clips, and you're absolutely right. It's total psychological warfare for that section of the country. That's exactly what that feed is about. It's not about, it's not anything that anybody would go to just to, how do I want to say this? I got to say this in the correct way. If you're just somebody somewhere around the world, the last thing you're going to do is go check out the CENTCOM feed. Okay, so what is there for you to see? Unless you're living in that, it's a total.
Unless you're me. I mean, I actually subscribe to the CENTCOM Twitter feed. But you're absolutely right. I mean, they have a very limited number, and yet, I mean, my 15-year-old son certainly doesn't subscribe to their Twitter feed, but what did he tell me when he walked in the door? What were all his high school friends talking about? Exactly that. And this is, by the way, just a couple hours after it happened. I mean, word got around. It's like, that is psychological warfare 101.
Totally.
And ISIS got, did the checkmate move.
Yeah, they cleaned it up pretty quick. As soon as I heard that they had grabbed
quick?
hold.
45 minutes?
Yeah.
That's not quick.
Oh, you
That's
don't think
not
so?
$5
I thought it was
quick. You're gonna have to read that 500-page document about how much money of your money and everybody else listening's money is spent on cybersecurity and is earmarked for cybersecurity, and then try and say with a straight face that 45 minutes and however many ISIS tweets later.
Well, as soon as I heard about it, I went straight to the feed, and it was already back to normal. So I didn't. Okay, so 45 minutes. Let me ask you this: Is there anything outside of the normal Twitter controls from Twitter that the Defense Department has to protect their Twitter feed, or are they just depending on? Are they depending on
From
Twitter?
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yes.
I mean, I'm imagining some guy, being sent down to pull the plug, literally the analog plug, to get this thing to stop. I mean, you're absolutely right. These are questions that ISIS wanted people to be asking. That's the psychological power of it.
Do you think it was ISIS? Do you think it actually was ISIS?
I don't know. I mean, I would think so. I would think so. Or let's put it this way: it's certainly someone who wanted the move. If you're tallying up the score here, it's someone who wanted ISIS to get the goal.
Yeah, I'm picturing, an ISIS IT control center somewhere in Syria. And I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that they actually are that sophisticated. Or are they? Is that,
well, I don't think it's, okay, I'll tell you
it doesn't
the
have
clue
to,
that got me.
It doesn't have to occur in Syria. Right.
The clue that got me was that the log line said, "I love ISIS."
Right.
Now, the ISIS I know and study does not say things like "I love ISIS." They don't use the word love anywhere. They are much more likely to use the word hate. So that was the only thing that made me go, really? But that's just semantics.
Well, and it doesn't have to be done in Syria. It can be done anywhere on planet Earth. Well,
there was an interesting hack from Anonymous, who I follow on Twitter, who said, and I'm paraphrasing, the ISIS, hashtag CENTCOM, the ISIS hack came from somewhere in Maryland, and then in parentheses it said, "You're welcome, FBI."
Right. Well, Anonymous, see, you know how I really feel about Anonymous? Anonymous is okay. There's really, Anonymous kind of keeps the bad guys and the good guys in check, because nobody wants to be on Anonymous's bad side. You just don't. And I'm being serious. Anonymous has never really done anything bad. They just kind of kept everything in check. And I'm not saying, think about it. What has Anonymous done that is bad? They haven't done anything bad. They've never done it. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of weird. And the bad guys are afraid of Anonymous. The good guys are afraid of Anonymous. And we have Anonymous right in the middle just to make sure. And that is a funny way to look at it. But somebody tell me one bad thing that Anonymous has ever done. They've never done anything bad.
Well, it's the force. In every force, counterforce, there's a neutralizer. And that's what you're saying they are, which is an interesting concept.
Well, you know what? I'm always going to say on the good side of Anonymous. It's a good side to be on. Annie, so what have you got going on? Are you speaking out there? Are you doing anything right now? Obviously, you're working on your new book, The Pentagon's Brain. Am I allowed to say that? Can I say that out loud?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm just happy that the paperback of Operation Paperclip is coming out next week, and it's also the 70-year anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
And are you?
Which is a very
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Are you going to be out speaking?
I am going to be out speaking. I mean, I'm definitely about that. Whenever the paperback comes out, it's a great opportunity for an author to talk about it because, like I said, so many people really like reading paperbacks, and I don't blame them at all. Sometimes it's easier to carry around.
And the best,
certainly a little bit bigger than your iPhone, but
the best place to go is AnnieJacobsen.com. Everything is there.
Everything's there.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to get you back on.
It's such fun talking to you. Thank you so much for having me.
I can't say this. Your voice makes you believe the tone, everything that you say. You've got that going for you in spades, Annie. Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
You too. Thank you. Annie Jacobsen, everybody. Let's take a quick break. Thank you so much. Annie Jacobsen. Oops, and that was me. AnnieJacobsen.com. With that, I'll be back right after this. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Coming right back with Stean Stone and Dean Ryan. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Thank you, Annie Jacobsen. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow us right now on Twitter at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. Come hang out in the sandbox. Shoot me an email to Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. Thank you, Annie. That was amazing, as always. Stean Stone, son of controversial filmmaker Oliver Stone, has acted in his father's films such as Wall Street, The Doors, JFK, Natural Born Killers, and many more. He has starred and directed in his own feature film, Greystone Park. Stean joined the team of investigators for the True TV hit Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura. Stean currently hosts an alternative media show, Buzzsaw, which I try to watch every day, featuring interviews with whistleblowers, styling himself as the real X-Files, looking into the hidden agendas behind the news. Dean Ryan, his producer, is a writer and radio personality for 21stCenturyWire.com. Dean has worked with Alex Jones, InfoWars, and Coast to Coast AM as a segment producer. His interviews have ranged from esoteric teachers such as Jordan Maxwell and Professor Griff to celebrities as Viggo Mortensen and Mario Lopez. In 2014, he gave first-hand groundbreaking reports on the Dallas Ebola scare for his radio program, The Sunday Wire, which went completely viral. I would like to welcome to Fade to Black for the first time, Stean Stone and Dean Ryan. Guys, are you both there?
We are here. Can you hear us?
I got you, Stean. Dean, are you there? Dean's in Australia, I think, right now, Dean.
Good, buddy.
Go. Welcome to Fade to Black, you two. And I'm just going to ask you out of the gate, how was life? And then we'll move on. Who's going?
Answer from down under. I want to make sure he's not lost in orbit somewhere.
Yeah, right?
Well, just surviving the extremely hot Australian summer and had an Australian Christmas and survived the Sydney siege that was going on. So, but now I'm just chillaxing out here and hope to be home soon.
Stean, I'm going to ask you the obvious question. You're in your father's footsteps in a good way, and that's amazing. But if your dad wasn't Oliver, would you be doing what you're doing now anyway?
I mean, that's an impossible question because we're all partly, at least, products of our environment. And the other part, as I say, is genetics. So ultimately, what does that leave us with is, who our parents are, or at least the people that have raised us. And, I think it's impossible to say what I would be otherwise, obviously, because my father's a certain kind of personality. So he's definitely inspired me since I would say since I was a kid. When he, watching films like JFK, being made as products, and then having conversations with him since that time forward that have helped to expand my understanding and my love of history. And I think searching his perpetual search for truth is very it's inspiring, especially when you have it in your own backyard, literally. So I can't say what I would have been if I'd been born to someone else. Who knows who would I be? I wouldn't be the same person.
Well, no, see, Sean, what I did was I set you up for the next question.
Yeah.
Of course that's your answer. But if your dad said now, today, you can't do this, it wouldn't stop you, would it?
Do what?
Stop. You can't continue down this conspiracy path, ufology and everything else. You need to slow down. You wouldn't.
Well,
you would keep doing what you're doing, wouldn't you?
I mean, obviously you don't know what my father thinks privately of what I'm investigating. I don't entirely know what he thinks privately of what I do. And I think that's part of what it is, to grow up and to become a man and to find your own sense of individuality and identity is to come into what interests you and what your passions are, right? And you got to be true to that. Otherwise, you're a sellout.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. What happened, Sean? What happened? I ask this of every guest on the show, and Dean, I'm going to hit you with this too. What happened? Something happens when you're a kid, where you could go straight, you could turn left, you can turn right. Something happened where you just decided to go down this path of asking questions and investigating. What happened? Was there?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
What happened is, you thought for yourself, and you're one of those, 20% or so, I would say, maybe less, who actually never wanted to conform, to go along, to get along, in a sense. And especially it begins in school, in elementary school, then it carries over, it gets worse in high school probably. But this whole system is kind of geared towards making you conform, not necessarily just as far as the classroom's setting and whether or not you're getting an A because you're reciting the proper history back, but really in terms of the social groupings and the fact of being willing to speak for yourself and think for yourself. I mean, I think in high school really was when I started to accept that I differed from my history teacher, and I was very vocal about it. And I started a magazine in high school with a friend of mine that was basically oriented towards people having a political, philosophical point of view and being able to speak their mind and speak their truth. So I think everyone has their age when it comes about where you really just start to say, this doesn't jive for me. And I think it really hit me more in my high school teenage years. I think some people wake up sooner, some people wake up much later. But at some point you have to realize, I'm willing to think for myself and not be told how to think.
How about you, Dean? Where did you take the right turn?
Well, I'm kind of the same as Sean. I was quite a contrarian growing up. I was raised by my grandparents who are from the World War II generation. I was adopted by them. So I really had a different look at pop culture and kind of my peers that were around me growing up. And I was really affected by, I was really affected at a very young age by the Vietnam War. That just fascinated me. At a very young age, I saw the movie Born on 4th of July and by myself at a very young age. And that really just kind of changed me, how I looked at things. And then in high school, I was really inspired by people like John Lennon. So it just really got me thinking outside the box. But later in life, in my 20s, I think the movie Obama Deception by Alex Jones really just opened my mind, and to just from the basic standpoint of 9/11, people like the Bilderberg Group and shadowy things like that just really got me thinking and really spoke me. But then it had me striving for solutions, which is what I'm doing today. So I think that was in Cliff Notes version my journey to where I am.
I'm going to throw. You can. You know what? I'll let Dean. I'm going to throw this to you first, but Sean, obviously, I need the answer on this, because Alex Jones back in the day seemed a little bit crazy, and now today we can look at Alex Jones as a true truth speaker. It's a lot of his things that he had thrown out there early on, it was like crazy talk, and now today it's all coming to fruition. It seems to be all true now. And how do you explain that? How do you explain this turnaround for him? He's obviously stuck to his guns, but you worked for him for a while, Dean. Do you understand the question?
Yeah. The question is how has he been received today? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, well, like I said, it was like crazy talk back then, and he was the crazy guy. And today we go to Alex for the truth now.
Right. Well, he was a guy that was very disturbed by going to college and having all these socialist, professors and communist professors, and he was reading all the documents that no one else was reading. We were more concerned about the Lewinsky scandals and all the other ridiculous things. So he questioned more, and he had a great passion, like Sean does, for history, and that's what inspired him to really look beyond the curtain and preach to people that didn't want to hear it. And so he was a minority back then, but that minority way of thinking is slowly becoming a majority. And if not a majority right now, we're a very strong minority than we were 20 years ago.
I tend to disagree, actually. I think that, Alex is in a tradition of a lot of radical thinkers that remember we've always had in this country. And he's more in the line of the John Birch Society, frankly, for better and for worse, both. But the John Birchers have been around, for going back to at least the 50s and 60s, right? Even supporting what was the Arizona senator who ran for president? I'm blanking his name again. He ran against Johnson. But the point being that, Alex is coming from a tradition of
Barry Goldwater.
Goldwater, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So coming from a tradition, that is not anomalous. The problem is that you're coming from a history that's been erased, where we used to have not entire freedom of the press, but we had a lot more press outlets. We had a lot of, literature. People were literate. They used to, they would read these journals or these leaflets, these magazines. You had groups like the LaRouche Political Action Committee, amongst many others, political action committees and whatnot, that were organizing, that were putting up candidates for independent parties. And all of that has kind of been streamlined now into becoming the major, mainstream media, we call it, right? MSM. And the two-party system, and so the idea of an Alex Jones all of a sudden seems as though he can attract attention and become in a way popular because he's got 2 million plus viewers, let's say, on a daily basis, right, or listeners, and yet that's always been there. I mean, they've always been there. They've always been the John Birch readers. They've always been the people that that were joining the anti-Mason parties or whatnot throughout our American history, and I think they just have lost, in a certain sense, a large part of their outlet because the smaller press has disappeared, but it's turned into online blogs such as this. It's turned into Alex Jones' show. It's turned into other different formats. So I don't feel like Alex is some kind of an anomaly. And I must say, regardless of where he ultimately stands, for me, he caught my attention when he broke into the Bohemian Grove. Right. And for that, I will always give him credit and props and think he did an amazing job, regardless of what happens to him or where he ends up. Because, sometimes he can become a bit bombastic and almost a parody of himself. But he's definitely has helped to wake people up the same way that I think David Icke did, the same way that who did Behold the Pale Horse? That was
Bill Cooper.
William Cooper, yeah. I mean, guys like this, they've been around for ages. In a certain sense, there's truth to that statement that, if they don't kill you and you stick around long enough, people will either learn to respect you or at least pay attention to you, just because of your longevity. So it's interesting to see, how these things do turn, from decade to decade, and events come into play, and you get 9/11 coming into play, and all of a sudden, people start to wake up and say, shoot, Bill Cooper and Ike and Alex Jones were talking about this in the 90s before 9/11 happened, and here we are now living through exactly, this kind of parody of a Nazi state, taking form with Homeland Security, etc. And so I think that really helps to sort of the fact that if you stick around long enough, oftentimes history will prove your point.
Sean, did you listen to Bill Cooper back in the day?
I gotta say, I mean, I was a kid in the 90s. It was sort of peripheral to me. Behold the Pale Horse was way beyond my worldview at 16, 17 or whatever. I mean, 9/11 happened when I was about 16, and all that stuff really was too far for me at that point. I was gradually understanding CIA black operations, the shadow government. I was working more off the text that people like William Blum, right, and people like Fletcher Prouty,
right,
more of or Noam Chomsky, people who were more historians, Howard Zinn, and looking at the history and saying, okay, based on historical fact, there's something going on here. And eventually you have to get to that point where you say, am I going to stick to what we can prove, what the government's going to admit, or are we now going to start taking leaps into the realm of whistleblowers and more fantastic accusations, which may or may not be entirely true, but may at least be based in truth?
How did you two get hooked up?
Well, Craigslist.
Also known as Alex Jones' show, I guess.
Misconnections. I don't know when was it, Sean? It was a few years ago.
It was Alex Jones' show.
Yeah.
You were producing for Alex, and I've been on Alex's show I think 3 or 4 times. And I made connections through that way. And it was through Alex's show because you were still producing, and we were introduced in Los Angeles. Yeah.
No, but we went to the Zeitgeist Festival. Remember? Like the first day I met you.
Well, you're very romantic and nostalgic, but at the end of the day, it was through Alex's network.
Question. Yeah, but that's so general. I'm just saying, the audience wants to know specifics.
Oh, okay. So you guys met at a Zeitgeist Festival, and that's actually in itself is raises an eyebrow.
Yeah, it was pretty far out. Yeah.
It was so far out, I don't remember anything about
it. Well, it's funny that you mentioned Zeitgeist. The first time that I saw that movie, somebody had handed me a copy of the DVD, and it almost like burned my hand. It was like, oh man, they know I have this. I'm going to get arrested. There was so much hype behind the movie. I'll never forget the first time that I watched it. I'm going to throw that at both of you. What did you think of Zeitgeist? And you know what? Zeitgeist then and Zeitgeist today.
I'll be honest with you. I was not particularly a big fan of Zeitgeist. I always tell people the same thing. It's a great intro 101 for those who are not studied in this. At that point, I'd already basically tried to pursue as much knowledge and information. So when they have clips of Jordan Maxwell or Lyndon LaRouche or David Icke or any of number of these people talking, I'd already done enough reading on my own into these matters that I never really found it to be that fascinating. But I'm glad it was more of a wake up, for people in a sense.
Yeah. Dean, same thing for you?
Yeah, pretty much. I kind of had my mind made up. I mean, what kind of concerns me about Zeitgeist is in the first one, they mentioned the re-education camps, which you could say is a playbook right out of Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward. But, whatever. It's a good introduction, I guess. If you get something from it and, you get tingles, go for it.
So when did you get the idea, Sean, for Buzzsaw? When did that start to kick off?
It was an interesting confluence of events in a sense, because I'd come off doing Conspiracy Theory in the third season with, Jesse Ventura was the main host, and then Tyrell Ventura, Jesse's son, had sort of come and talked to me about doing the third season of Conspiracy Theory as his co-host, because Jesse was sort of landlocked. He couldn't travel because of his lawsuit against the TSA. He couldn't travel by air. So the idea was that Tyrell and I would take over most of the interview duties for Jesse. And once we connected on that show and did the third season, now True TV basically destroyed Conspiracy Theory. I mean, at that point, they were already opposed to the show after the second season when Jesse went after the concentration camps in America episode, right? With Alex Jones was a major figure in that whistleblower and that saga, looking into the potential for basically martial law. And that episode had really infuriated congressmen, had ultimately led to True TV banning that episode. It was never re-aired. So that was the second season. That meant that Conspiracy Theory that was basically done after that. The third season they had to make, but they had no desire to continue. So I was in the final season of Conspiracy Theory with Tyrell, as I said. And when that came to an end, basically through Ed Gibson, who's Mel Gibson's son, and his brother Will, who was a producer for the Lip, which is an online news channel, I ended up being asked to just see if we could do a show. And what Tyrell Ventura and I ultimately came up with is now Buzzsaw. Now, ultimately, Tyrell has left. He used to do the news segment of Buzzsaw. He's gone on. He's now working at RT, Russia Today, as a producer and sometimes commentator.
Right.
And meanwhile, I keep doing Buzzsaw, which is, for me, a continuation of Conspiracy Theory. It's the real-life X-Files. We get to do those long-format interviews that I find so much more compelling in a sense than what you get on these documentaries, because the documentaries and the reality shows are so spun and tailored, in the same way that the mainstream media tailors things to, the 30-second soundbite and doesn't give you really time to absorb and think. And so what we do at Buzzsaw is we get to take these longer format 30-minute to 1 hour long interviews and really, talk about a subject and look at it from different points of view, and ultimately have some great, guests and topics.
Were you working with Conspiracy Theory when what's his name from San Diego died in the hotel?
Fred Bell.
Fred Bell, yeah.
Yeah, Fred Bell died. I didn't meet him because Jesse did that interview. And it was interesting because Jesse apparently had asked Fred about things relating to not only a death ray technology, basically that you could kill someone from a distance, but also he had asked Fred about the alien presence on Earth, and Fred had said that he had personally met with some gray type of aliens at underground military bases. And he basically said this, off the record of the show. And he said some things to Jesse that he said, my CIA handler won't like me telling you this. And sure enough, within 24 hours, I believe, or within 48 hours, he dropped dead. So that obviously leaves some suspicion, but it's the kind of death where it doesn't seem you can prove it, because sometimes, maybe sure, he might have been a cardiac arrest or it could have been caused, but I think they have that technology to create that and make it look, like a heart attack. But again, how do you prove it?
Well, and if you know the story better than me, but wasn't it something, one of the production assistants for the show had called the CIA to talk to his handler or confirm that Fred Bell had a handler, and then it was like the next day or 24 hours later he was actually found dead in a hotel room. I think that's the timing of it.
I know the timing of it was within 24 to 48 hours of talking to Jesse. I don't know of the actual conversation with the handler by the production assistant, but it was definitely within Fred Bell speaking directly to Jesse.
Yeah, when you're doing a show like, Jesse was doing, Conspiracy Theory, and something like this lays down, it causes everybody, and I'm certainly you too as well, to step back and go, hey, you know what? Well, I think we're a little bit too close to the fire. Something is actually going on here.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never had that feeling, to be honest. I mean, there's something about, I've heard it said where, when you are basically interfering with an active operation in intelligence world, at that point, you will be asked to step back or to be quiet, or if not, then threats will come into play, or then you can seriously be concerned about loss of life. But if it's not an active operation, I don't think I think it'd be very rare for someone to want to off you.
Have you had any strange experiences in doing buzzsaw? This is to the both of you, where an outside influence has maybe leaned on you a little bit, that you were asking the wrong questions of the wrong people at the wrong time?
I don't. What are you gonna say, Dean?
I was gonna say I've met a super soldier from Blackwater, and he had 52 tallies of tattoos on his left forearm for all the hand-to-hand kills he had somewhere in the Middle East, which he couldn't tell me. And then he proceeded to tell me that him and his brother who's still in, and he's trying to get a new contract as a mercenary. He proceeded to tell me, after I asked him who are some of the black operations involved in 9/11, he paused and told me I really need to be careful who I asked that to, because he knew, and it was really cold. So that was probably the closest thing I've ever had to being kind of, a little scared in that situation.
Sean?
I don't think it's, from my experience, it's not usually done in so overt a way. Remember, there are all kinds of agents of influence around us, and we don't necessarily know who people are, and who's an asset, who's been deployed into your circle to influence you in a certain direction. A lot of that can be done more remotely and less directly, especially when you're dealing with people who are, in my case, sort of have a certain public, a bit of a certain public figure role.
Sure.
I think it would be very strange to get, to directly threaten or tell me to step back. But again, I don't think that I've touched upon anything that's an active operation. And the only time I have confronted I would say yes, I know there's conspiracies, because I have firsthand. I talked about this in Alex Jones' show. I have received calls from very demonic sounding beings, whether they were entities or some kind of, NSA personnel. I can't tell you, but they definitely knew exactly what I was doing in my apartment in New York City at that time, and I was being monitored and watched moment by moment for a certain period of time. So, again, I know when you're confronted by it, you're dealing with a conspiracy, but again, you don't always know why, what role you're playing or not playing or meant to play. And it's just not this, it's just not as, it's more of what Hollywood dreams, because I think, as they say, truth is much stranger than fiction, because truth is not bound by possibilities, but it really has, it's really just whatever you can't possibly believe is real actually is usually the truth.
And in this genre that we're doing here, your show, my show, where we are seekers of the truth, outside of the mainstream media, trying to figure out what's going on out there all the time. You're also approached by people that will always say, you got to be careful what you're doing right now. You need to be aware. You need to listen to. It's not what you say. You always get these warnings, and then you start to maybe think, "Am I crazy?" And that's kind of what you're alluding to there, in that it wouldn't be overt. It's going to be something. They're going to be very, very, very clever. And have you ever felt that, where maybe they're successful in changing your frame of thought?
No, not really, because I just don't care. I'm just too into this. I mean, and on the flip side, you get kind of on the other side of that, you kind of get the crazy people, or people that are accusing you of being insiders or informants.
Which that's exactly what I'm saying, Dean. That's exactly what I'm saying. And
well, Sean should tell that story about the Clone Center. Remember, Sean? That's a great story.
The Clone Center?
I apparently work at a clone center.
Okay, hold on. We're at the top of the hour. This is Fade to Black in the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking with Sean Stone and Dean Ryan. And I guess Sean's going to tell us about the Clone Center. Yeah. Go ahead, Sean.
Are we starting over?
Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead. We just reset.
Yeah. I think if you Google it, there are characters out there who have all kinds of accusations about me being either being a clone or having clones of myself who go out and gang stalk and harass certain individuals. And apparently I go to a clone center, my father as well, and a few other Hollywood people apparently like rape people at this clone center at night. I don't know how I get to Canada that quickly on a nightly basis. But it's kind of, again, the problem is that I kind of came to this issue early on when dealing with the conspiracy realm, which is, look, there's a 3D reality that we can try to dig into and find the material, concrete conspiracies and the government agencies and whatnot, name names, but that's not where reality ends. There is also a dimensionality to the conspiracy, and this is what is so intriguing to me when it comes to. Even when Alex Jones has talked about, he doesn't want to go there often, but he says, the Illuminati believe in magic and rituals and whatnot. And there's a reason for it. You can dismiss it and be like, these guys are cartoons and clowns and they're just really inbred idiots. But I don't really believe that. I actually think that there's a higher, what's called mystery school or ancient knowledge that does get passed on, partly through Masonic type networks. Obviously there's more secretive lodges that are within the Masonic structure, and these magical practices are designed to attack and influence and manipulate the so-called spiritual world. But the spiritual world is everything beyond our three-dimensional science. So the problem when it comes to a lot of these accusations and like super soldiers and whatnot is that we can't discount the power of the human mind and what is being done on the so-called, mental plane or the astral plane, right? The non-physical plane, because oftentimes that is what manifests our reality. And that's why the media, as it says in Natural Born Killers, it creates weather. And by creating weather, you create psychological conditions. And that's really what is so important overall for people to understand about the world that we're in. It's not just a concrete reality. And if you think that you're just if you think that you're just committed to one cause, and that you're righteous and you know the right answer, you start to come across ideas that are actually quite alien and foreign to perhaps what you initially believed, and yet no less relevant and true. And so that's where it becomes very complicated. And that's where this game of the Illuminati and whatnot becomes very mysterious. And so I can't speak 100% accurately on it. I'm not born into an Illuminati family that I know of. I wasn't ritually abused. I wasn't given some kind of secret knowledge, but I've certainly sought it out on my own. And I've come to realize that the world is far stranger than most people could ever imagine.
Where do you go for your news?
I don't. It comes to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great answer. Where do you go? Where do you go for your news? Yeah.
I don't believe. I don't open up a newspaper in the morning. I basically let the news filter in to me, because honestly, I don't want to pollute my mind every morning with what the mainstream media is trying to tell me. If it's the New York Times or CNN, it's like, that's pollution. I want to be clear, and then if a story arises, I'll look at it. But I feel that the more you understand the nature of the whole, the more you understand like the big picture and the dynamics at work because of your understanding of history, for example, the less it's news, and actually it's more old news than anything. It's like, oh, okay, we've been here before, we've done this before. Sure, it may seem new, but it's oftentimes a reworking of a reconfiguration of something that's already been formulated by others, and especially when it comes to the news, formulated by the Council on Foreign Relations.
With 2014 was a pretty crazy year when it comes to the media and mainstream media. It seemed like we had one crazy world-changing event after another. Obviously, Dean, Ebola. We can talk about that. But you had MH370, MH17. You had Crimea and Russia, and of course stuff coming out of North Korea on a daily basis, and Ebola. We had all of these events coming at us all in a row, and now it's hitting us right now, going into 2015. Paris last week, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Where do you try to find the truth in each one of these events? Because what is on the surface certainly is never, the real story. How do you start to pick all of these events apart to try to get to the truth?
Well, we have to understand the definitions, as I'm sure your audience does, as the false flag operation, the hardcore definition of it. And when you understand that and you siphon the news and put it through that blender of what a false flag is, and it fits all the parameters of what that is, then you look at it from that third angle that you're not getting from the liberal and conservative media. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. I mean, I remember being at Starbucks and like soccer moms, would be talking about the beheading videos and saying like, God, it doesn't look real. It looks like green screen. It just fits too much into the narrative of the U.S. want to go into Syria. So, I mean, and with this Paris thing, it's just such a sloppy job of an inside job, but it just, the events don't add up. And, we've reported this at my agency, and it makes no sense.
Everything good, Sean?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
I think Sean fell down.
Yeah.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm just letting Dean talk.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I need some more tea.
But anyway, it is. There's a lot of anomalies, and if you place them back to back with, Kennedy, 9/11, and Sandy Hook to a degree, it's just they all fit kind of the same narrative of what the government-sponsored media is trying to portray.
Sean, when you first started to hear the news coming out of Paris, it's coming at you from all sides. What was your gut telling you at that time?
Operation Gladio.
Yeah, totally.
It just, for all of us who know Operation Gladio, it's a NATO organized stay behind armies, basically false flag operations that they used left-right tactics to create chaos. And this is documented throughout the Cold War period, right? Post World War II, often utilizing right-wing neo-Nazi types, or actually at that time real Nazis, old Nazis, as basically you'd basically blow up a train station, let's say like in Bologna or somewhere, and you'd blame it on the left-wing Communist Party, or you'd kidnap someone and blame it on the Red Brigade, or you'd basically do all these operations and always blame it on the left-wing so-called Communist Party or more left-leaning party, and you usually utilizing a right-wing element. That's sort of traditional Gladio. And to see this kind of shootout in Paris, obviously brings up so many questions as to how the intelligence services don't know that these guys are armed to the teeth like that in a place like a country like France, especially where it's so hard to get a weapon in the first place, let alone a whole arsenal for your AK-47s. Obviously, I don't believe the Al-Qaeda mythology in general. I believe Al-Qaeda is what Robin Cook of the British, I think it was the foreign minister, had said it was. It was a private army, basically, that was deployed, mercenaries, that was being deployed by the Western intelligence services. And it was Al-Qaeda really just meant the database of names former mujahideen who've been drawn into Afghanistan in the first place. The same thing they were doing now with Syria. You draw in all these foreign fighters from Muslim countries and deploy them in a jihad. And meantime, you're taking their names and, you're arming them, training them, and then, you utilize them for this kind of operation. Now, the people involved may or may not know that they are actually ultimately agents of Western intelligence. They may believe in jihad. They may believe that they're doing the right thing. But at the end of the day, they're just dupes or patsies.
How, and when you look at the events in Paris, it just seemed on all fronts completely sloppy for a false flag operation. And even if it wasn't false flag, those guys were doofuses if it was just a shootout and they were just ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Yemen and all of it. It seemed completely sloppy when the first reports were about how professional these guys were, right, in the streets. And then you just had one move after another of complete sloppiness for guys like you and myself to just see through. It was just so obvious. Can you explain the sloppiness of everything? I mean, it seems to me right now the entire operation is just falling apart.
Well, sloppy in what sense, though? Like, what exactly are you thinking?
IDs left in the car. Okay.
But how is that any more sloppy than Muhammad Atta losing his passport in a plane that exploded and yet somehow shows up in the wreckage of a World Trade Center building? So,
well,
how is that Muhammad Atta being sloppy?
Well, I don't think that's him being sloppy. I just think that was a situation where, it was just planted.
Right.
So
what's the difference?
But what I mean,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, what I mean is, it was.
My point is that the killers, the so-called killers, the patsies, are now dead. So my question again is, how do we know it's sloppiness on their part and it's not a complete setup in the first place?
Well, being able to be so professional to get outside of Paris, to break through 4 police cars and all of that, and then somehow just wind up without any food or gas or money or anything, and now you're just walking in the woods outside of Paris, that just seems retarded to me.
But again, my point is, why do you say that's sloppiness and not that they were patsies, just like Oswald was sloppy?
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. yes. That's exactly my point.
It's like Oswald was so sloppy, he walked into a movie theater and he thought he could, and then next thing you know, the entire Dallas Police Department
is outside the front door,
outside the theater, ready to arrest the assassin.
And that's my point. Right. I mean, it's too easy for us to figure out. It's just something doesn't smell right, and I can't quite figure it out. Either the ones that are setting up the false flag operate are just complete idiots. Either you cover your tracks or you don't. I just don't get the sloppiness part.
We're talking about, brought to you by the people that blew up World Trade Center Building 7 because they said, you know what, no one's going to realize that the building's gone. I mean, come on, really? Do you understand these people have no consideration for the human mind? They have no consideration for the mass of humanity because people are that dumb. People are still sitting here. Half the population of America is still sitting here thinking 9/11 was done by a bunch of box cutting Afghanis, apparently, even though they were Saudis or Muslims. And the point being that no one asks what the hell did happen to World Trade Center Building 7, which wasn't hit by anything, and yet somehow completely exploded at near free fall speed.
So I'll throw it out to you again. Now that we've discussed all of that, at what point when the report started coming out of Paris did you just throw up your arms and go, "Come on"?
Well, Jimmy, if I could just expand on what you're saying, I mean, we broke some huge stories at 21st Century Wire. I mean, we were one of the first people to say the shooter, Amendi Kulbabi, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, met with Nicolas Sarkozy in 2009, and you can look at the newspaper clips, and we put it that, and then the twist comes, the police commissioner, the head investigator of this whole operation, is found dead days ago of an apparent suicide.
Right.
And then the famous or the infamous clip of the officer who's on the sidewalk getting shot in the head point blank by one of the terrorists, and no blood splatters anywhere, which that clip has been taken down repeatedly off of YouTube. So, I mean, you're right. The writers of this false flag operation are not very good writers.
It's a
very sloppy narrative.
Yeah,
I think again, the point being that it's not so much about the sloppiness as much as all these operations are sloppy, because when you're telling a lie, it's very difficult to, to make it believable, right? So what they do is the old Nazi thing, right? It was just what I think it was Goebbels, Goebbels or Goering, who said, "The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it," right? And the point is that always works, because when people see machine guns firing or they see a bomb go off, they go into a panic, into a reptilian reactive brain, and they can't think for themselves anymore. So it becomes, oh, that makes total sense, because these people we've been brainwashed by especially the last 13, 14 years post 9/11 to believe that all Muslims are, not all, but are basically jihadis and they're fanatics, right? That's what it is to be a Muslim. It's not hard to imagine that these guys would kill in the name of Allah, right? So already you're more inclined to believe that than to believe that your own intelligence services might be working with another initiative, which might be, for example, to destabilize Hollande in his position, because Hollande has been trying to do what? To try to reconcile with Russia, right? For the last month or so. There have been meetings. There has been a call by the French president to stop this sanctioning of Russia. And so as France basically might be that weak link in the bunch in the EU, which is really just part of NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Ultimately, it's British, it's Anglo-American Empire, right? So if France in any way deters from that, well, let's rally the troops, let's get them fired up, and let's create this civil war in Europe, which is what I'm seeing a lot of. The day before the shooting in Paris, we had rioting by neo-Nazi groups against the Turkish immigrants in Germany, right? And daily we're having newspaper articles and Islamophobia in England, right, against all these Muslims that are in England now. Same situation in Paris, all these immigrants, these Muslims. So the point is that they're trying to foment as much as they can civil war type of situations, hatred of the immigrant, of the foreigner. In Europe's case, it's mostly Muslims. In our case, ironically, it's Mexicans, some of whom also cut off heads. But no one goes around. No one goes around saying like, "Well, what? Look at these jihadi Muslim Mexicans cutting off heads." You see, it's not only Muslims that cut off heads, and also we don't have a problem blowing people up, which also might decapitate them. But hey, we're doing it in the name of money, which is much more sane than doing it in the name of God. You understand that we're in a completely insane world right now. That nothing makes sense. So to say that two Muslim guys picked up machine guns in Paris and started shooting a bunch of people because they're anti-Semitic, that kind of makes sense to people.
Well, and there was also, if you remember, the original video that was posted, on mainstream media only showed two shooters, but they were adamant about three. And I never saw three guys ever. There was always two guys coming out of the car. And I thought that was strange to have that kind of information ahead of the game, unless you were reading from a script.
Well, I'll tell you something. You want to hear something even crazier? Even crazier. There is a script, because a lot of times movies sync to actual events. And if you remember, there was a movie that came out a few years ago called The Truth About Charlie.
Yes.
The reason that the name of that film popped into my head was as soon as I heard all these people going, "Je suis Charlie," it was like, Charlie, Truth About Charlie. What was Truth About Charlie? It was a remake of Charade set in Paris,
right,
about a man named Charlie who dies in the opening, right? And it turns out that nothing about him is kosher, that he's actually a former intelligence operative who's been killed by three mysterious men who are also former intelligence operatives. And regardless of the actual, the story is ultimately about them trying to find this gold that Charlie stole. But the point being that it was very impactful. The symbolism of the three men having been the killers of Charlie, right, are the ones who are now accused in this situation. There have to be three killers, even though, as you said, there was originally only two. That was very interesting. And then the fact that there was one woman that went missing. And the truth about Charlie, the woman who was suspect was Charlie's wife.
That's right.
You see? And who was the fifth? The one who died, the inspector in The Truth About Charlie, is the is sort of the embassy, the U.S. embassy figure, who in the original charade was ultimately the bad guy, and he ended up dying. So he was investigating Charlie's death, and he ends up dying at the end. So maybe that was the figure of the French detective inspector who kills himself. So I just figured this is interesting in terms of the numbers of it all. Plus, the 3 terrorists, dying was very interesting because the day of the shootings, the Charlie Hebdo shootings, was the day after the Epiphany, when the 3 wise men come to Jesus. So now you have 3 wise men, but in this case we have 3 shooters, 3 killers.
Right.
So it's just very interesting when you understand the symbolism and whatnot. You start to pay attention to these things. You understand these staged events.
And why isn't anybody questioning? And I'm talking about in the mainstream media, some of the obvious things. One, the shooter's girlfriend was in that store, somehow snuck out and got away. Turns out she wasn't there at all. Apparently she was in Turkey on January 2nd. Or, who knows what is really true here. But they had this information. Where did they get this information from? Was it from one of the hostages inside saying that he was there with his girlfriend? Where did this information come from? Or was she not there at all now? And why isn't anybody asking any questions about this? It's like it's been let go. Now she's just on the run. But nobody's asking who saw her in the store. Where did this information come from? And or was there another woman in the store with him during the shooting? But nobody is questioning authority here.
Well, let's ask you this. How about questioning authority? People are talking about Charlie Hebdo, and they're saying, well, they have freedom of speech in France, and they're trying to, and Charlie Hebdo represents that because they were making satire against Muslims and Muhammad and whatnot. Do you know that Charlie Hebdo fired a writer a few years ago because of her anti-Semitic remarks, because she had basically made fun of Sarkozy's son for converting to Judaism and saying that it was for the money. And for that, she was fired for anti-Semitism. And I think she's actually being tried for anti-Semitism laws. But when it comes to making fun of Muslims, it's a complete double standard, right? Not to say that anti-Semitism is good, but obviously if you're poking fun at Jews, but that's not acceptable. But you can poke fun at Muslims all day.
What do you think the end game is right now with this Paris incident? What in this script of false flag? What's the end game?
Again, I think you have to go to this issue of strategy of tension, civil war between and with the anti-Islamic sentiment in Europe being fomented as much as possible. I think that you have to look at the overall strategy against Russia and the fact that any country that might soften in that stance right now, whether it be France, Germany, whomever, could suffer a similar attack. I think those are the major themes that you have to look at, especially in the wake of what's been a long stream of these crazy shootings. Beginning with obviously the magical, mysterious Muslim fanatic group of ISIS this year,
right,
through the Canada shooting where the guy shows up to Parliament, right, or with the shotgun and starts shooting it up.
Ottawa, yeah.
Yeah. Then you have the Australia shooting, right? Again, it's another crazy Muslim who, again, we know was under surveillance, and just things don't add up. And then now you have Paris right afterward. It's to me, it's like the Clash of Civilizations thing on steroids. And again, it's why the overdrive? What is there a pending civil war schedule that they're trying to push? Not civil war, World War III scenario they're trying to push, or they're trying to push for this, for the Syria war, which ultimately could lead to a war with Russia. I mean, the point is that ultimately this is all feeding into fear, fanaticism, warfare, bloodshed.
Are we on the onset of Dean? I would love to hear your answer on this. Is it the buildup of another coalition to go and to march back into Iraq and march into Syria, and we're trying to unite all of the world once again behind this stance to, just like we did in 1991 with Iraq and Kuwait and the building of the coalition, and of course 2002, 2003 building of a coalition. Is that what is that it? I know it's so obvious, it's right in front of us, but if we see it play out, nobody's going to question it because it's all on this united front against ISIS.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, being here in Sydney when the hostage situation happened, you had Tony Abbott, the prime minister, saying we need to strengthen our forces with the coalition and go get ISIS, go back into Iraq, Iraq 2.0. And, and I also think it's to prevent Palestine from being recognized, because as soon as that happens, they're going to go after Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes. And, the same guy that was warning France of grave consequences if they vote to recognize Palestine, about a week ago. So it is to build up a coalition and probably to get a pipeline from Saudi Arabia into Syria and to ultimately poke the bear of Russia, which will lead to the great next war. And they have to strip the liberties of all free humanity for this to happen. We have to have the police states, and that's what's going on here in Australia. The interlinkings and workings to build up their homeland security, make their Patriot Act, calling for more surveillance. They were running drills here in Martin Place in Sydney of the same kind of attack during the hostage siege a year ago through Operation Hammerhead. And just all these things are coming. Yeah. So like Sean said, it is the build up to the great next war.
What do you make of Obama, shunning the Unity Walk on Sunday? There's obviously something going on there.
Well, I thought the Unity Walk with the world leaders was it's just quite humorous. And, the same people that censor their own people from speaking out, especially in Israel. It was probably a good thing, in my opinion, for a fake photo op, which they cropped the photo saying there was millions of people behind the leaders. They cropped the photo. There was like a good, 1,000, maybe less than that.
Oh, is that right? I didn't catch that. Sean, what do you what do you make of Obama or Kerry or Biden not showing up in Paris?
Yeah, that's very obvious and overt. Was the British Prime Minister there, or any of the British representatives?
No, I think the British Prime Minister was there. Yes, and Merkel was there. Yeah.
No, I know Merkel, but was the British? Was it Cameron was there?
Was Cameron there? Somebody in Twitter is going to bang that out really quick, and I'll find out. We don't need to search, but
yeah. I mean, I would say let's leave that question on the table and maybe assess with more evidence, because it's obviously a glaring event. It's a glaring photo op for Obama to pass over. I don't really. I mean, obviously it's intentional, but again, I don't want to comment on why.
Well, when you have strategists that are sitting around in scary rooms that you and I know nothing about, and all of this is strategize and public opinion and photo ops and everything, and the one place where we needed to be, we weren't. And you're right, it's so overt, it's crazy, and there's got to be a reason behind it.
Where is Obama? Does anyone know?
He was in.
I don't know.
Well, I think Obama was in Washington. Biden was in Washington, and Kerry was in India. I believe he had a previous booking in India that he couldn't break off of, for 4 hours, and fly to Paris and do the walk.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unless Obama was at some major Masonic ceremony, I can't imagine what was going on. That was so important. No, I just, again, I think it's very obvious that there's a reason behind it. You could even go so far as to speculate that he was not. I don't know. I mean, perhaps there is more to the reasoning and the personalities involved. So let's just say that it's intentional, but I don't want to speculate why.
What do you think, Dean? Dean, are you there? I think we might have lost Dean. Are you there, Sean?
I'm still here.
Okay, you know what?
I think he got kicked out of Australia for speaking against the Homeland Security Initiative.
Let's take 2 minutes. I'm going to run a commercial break, and I'm going to reset with Dean. Just hang tight, Sean.
Sure thing.
This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We are talking with Dean Ryan and Sean Stone. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us, everybody.
And I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Jimmy Church.
My name is Alan, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio, the Revolution.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network, bespoke radio for the masses. Shoot me an email to Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. If you have any questions for Sean or Dean, Twitter, hashtag F2BQ. All right, guys, I got you both back. Are you both there? Are we solid? Are we solid?
I think Sean's making teen crumpets right now.
Okay, that's fine. Hey, Dean, I'm looking at the picture right here of the walk, and you're absolutely right. I don't even think there's 1,000 people here.
Yeah, I was being generous. Maybe 500 or less than that, but it's quite ridiculous. It's just a photo op. That's all it is.
Yeah, you're totally right. The ones that were published were cropped out, and you assume that the crowd continues back and continues back and continues back. That's interesting.
I mean, and Netanyahu, he went there to go to synagogue, pay his respects, but he warned of grave consequences. I mean, can you imagine if someone said that to you, and then like your family dies like a week later?
Well, and that's
bizarre.
There's right now, when we look at obviously Syria, but you've got Jordan, you've got what's going on in Lebanon, you've got what's going on in Palestine, and the instability in Iraq, which seems to me, the more that I look back, all the way back to 1991, the instability of Iraq seems to be 100% intentional. I just and also you got to throw in Afghanistan too. But when we look at Lebanon and Jordan, it's something doesn't feel quite right. But we're watching it play out in front of us, and we can't seem to do anything about it.
No, that's right. They got our tax money. The tax money is for these covert operations and these big wars. It's unreal. And I see the coalition building. I see the rhetoric coming out from the Australian government, from Tony Abbott. And, it's just so ridiculous. I mean, when the hostage taker over here, he asked for an ISIS flag from the police, or he was going to kill hostages. They brought him a flag. It was the wrong flag. They had to get an ISIS flag. I mean, it's just so obvious.
Oh, when he was inside the coffee shop, he asked for an ISIS flag?
They probably brought the Al-Qaeda flag. The ISIS is out of stock.
I've never heard. Sean, did you hear about that?
In Australia?
Yeah.
I honestly think I heard it through Dean and Ben Patrick.
Now, how many days away do you think you guys, or do you think that we are from a direct ISIS incident here in the United States?
Oh man, now you get into the Alex Jones stuff. That's my problem. Is like, no, it's not about fear mongering and trying to tell people, that the terrorists are coming and the end is nigh, and we can't change anything. No, it's just we're here to inform and to wake people up and to ultimately ideally get people motivated to want to make a difference in their own lives, and that speaks at all walks of life, from the civilians to the military, to people in positions of power. Obviously, there are those who will never be shaken, and there are sociopaths and others who are so caught up in their own lust for power and control that they can never be awoken. But there are plenty of subordinates and people who are still human, and those are the people that we're trying to, I think, connect with and awaken, and hopefully will avert those kinds of attacks from happening.
Well, you had said it earlier, Sean. Oh, I'm sorry, Dean. Were you going to say something?
Jamie, I was going to just answer a question. I mean, as a betting man, I mean, if we're going to gamble on this, I'm going to say the closer we get to the election, we're going to see some funny things happen.
Sure.
Which may cause an outcry of, we need a strong wartime president. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, yeah, and Sean, I'm the last fear-mongering guy out there. I do not subscribe to that at all on this show. That's not what it's about. What I am seeing, though, is it's just like the domino effect. You're seeing little things happen, all around in the countries that you need to build this coalition, and it's just like you're seeing it one country at a time. This ISIS thing just happen. It hasn't happened here yet, and we're like the last little thing. It's just happened in Canada, It's happened in Australia. It's happened in Great Britain. France.
The one thing that would scare me a little bit is that the colors of the upcoming Packers Seahawks game is similar to the Dark Knight stadium scene when the stadium blew up, and I think the one thing that does kind of, again, you can't predict it, but that's been interesting is watching all these movies where the stadiums get destroyed, whether it's Oblivion or the last X-Men Last Stand or Dark Knight Rises. Again, you start to notice, there's a lot of destroyed stadiums here. I hope that doesn't mean something. But like I said, the yellow, it was more yellow and black. It was more Steelers colors, but it was yellow and black against the Seahawks colors in the Dark Knight Rises game. And now we got the yellow of the Packers, yellow and green, against the Seahawks in this upcoming game. But again, if nothing happens there, that'll be a good sign. And, like I said, there are a lot of attacks that do get averted. And I do believe it's, I did an interview on Buzzsaw about a couple of weeks ago with John Banks, who's a former MI6 sort of operative. He was a paratrooper, special services. He was used by the CIA, DEA, many different agencies over the years. And he talked as a whistleblower on our show about in 2010, there was Al-Qaeda networks in South Africa that he was monitoring because of the narcotics traffic. Now, narcotics traffic is all monitored by CIA and utilized for financing purposes by them and other secret intelligence operatives for money raising. And ultimately, the narcotics traffickers are oftentimes utilized side by side with terrorist networks like Al-Qaeda. So he was monitoring an Al-Qaeda operation where they were preparing to hit the World Cup in 2010, as well as cities as diverse as Los Angeles, Vegas, and San Diego. And he ultimately was involved in trying to pass it on to CIA and other intelligence officers who basically just kept letting it go. And he got really nervous and ultimately got it to South African, more local services who ended up rolling up one of the cells. And it seems that they successfully were able to avert these attacks. But the point is, we just don't know at what point, these things are in play. And according to what maybe one faction at the higher level, the shadow government, let's say that, is associated with the Bush family types, right? And the more dynastic skull and bones, people.
Right.
And if that faction would, let's say, like to have more chaos and terror, and yet all it takes is a few good guys, a few really, solid operatives, because not everyone who's CIA is dirty, not everyone who's in the government is dirty. But again, it's just a question of, we don't know who's who. We don't, I'm not inside of these operations. I can't tell you how exactly, how high it goes and who ultimately is positioned to let things sort of, pass before our eyes. I can tell you 9/11 was an inside job, but I can't tell you exactly, everybody that was involved in that operation, right? So we have to trust that there are good people and they are doing their jobs. And ultimately, if they do their jobs properly, there will not be any major terrorist attack, because all these terrorists and these groups are not. They're not like Bane in Dark Knight Rises. It's coming out of sewers. Mm-hmm. They are known entities all over the world. We have intelligence services and operatives. We have NSA working on monitoring all these different phones and tracking and whatnot. This has been done for decades. These people are not unknown quantities that just pop up one day. They are all known. They're all watched. They're monitored. And when someone says, "Okay, let it go," during an anti-terrorist drill, for example,
right?
That's when things go down. That's when it gets dangerous. When you're running a terrorist drill, and next thing you know, the guy that it was basically the one at the top basically said, "That's okay, let that one go," and everyone else thought it was just a fake bomb. That one actually goes off. That's the kind of thing that's going to occur. Otherwise, again, we have to trust in the people who are doing their best to stop these things, because I really believe that they can stop it. It's just a question of not being deterred in their work by some more nefarious force.
Now, thank you both for hanging. I'm going to force you to stay for another 5 or 10 minutes, because now, Sean, I can't let you get away without me asking a couple of fun questions. I got to take the opportunity. Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to Hollywood and the Illuminati symbolism, is that real? What's your gut? What's really going on there?
The fun thing is we're doing a show on Buzzsaw, and it's coming Friday on some of the hidden symbolism, where we talk to a master mason who deciphers a lot of the symbolism in his books, and it's just like it's glaring things. Movies like Back to the Future, many big classic movies people love to watch are full of the symbols and mythology of ancient Egypt or whatnot. I can't tell you exactly, because I don't know at what level, as a creator, we are tapping into another domain of reality, of dimensionality. At what level we're being influenced in our thoughts and our creativity. At what level is it very conscious? When you look at these movies and you keep seeing 33 popping up, whether it's the sequel to Sherlock Holmes or The All-Seeing Eye and Les Miserables in an alleyway during the Revolution, it's like there are certain things that just kind of pop out to you the more you're aware of it, and it makes you wonder, okay, was that the art designer, production designer that did it, or was it the entire film some kind of in a sense Masonic symbol? Was the whole film designed to be a ritual?
Right.
And that's where I just don't know, because there are definitely artists who are Masons. And again, Masons are not all bad, despite what people want to believe. But at what level is this conscious? At what level is this the unconscious mind, creative mind coming through? I can't answer that.
Dean, what do you think?
I just think there's useful tools out there that have handlers that are really into the occult, that are really into these pedophile sex rings in Hollywood. And I think there's people like just Katy Perry who have just no idea, or she might have some idea, just going along to get along, that are just being used for the one big platform to do these secret society symbolisms, all these Illuminati symbolisms all over the place. But then there's the artists that clearly know what they're doing. You see Jay-Z doing the Illuminati triangle sign constantly.
Madonna's latest hit song.
Yeah, Madonna's desperate attempt to be relevant again.
Yeah, right. Well,
so it's hard to say.
I would venture to guess that if you took a close look at every major Hollywood release, not independent, underground stuff, but every major Hollywood release, and you sit there and you watch the entire film, you're going to find in that film a seeing eye somewhere. You're going to find the 33 somewhere. You're going to see a Masonic temple, and it's every single film, and that's the realm of coincidence that you have to remove. And that's the fuel that all of the conspiracy guys out there, that's all they need. They can just go, look.
See it, Jimmy, you see it in The Simpsons.
That's right. That's exactly my point.
Harry Shearer from The Simpsons, he hangs at the Bohemian Grove and defends it. and he's a main player on The Simpsons.
Yeah, but there's also, the synchronicity aspect of all things, right?
Well,
Sure.
The synchronicity of the Robin Williams episode of Family Guy being aired right when Robin Williams has announced that he suicided himself, right, with the cutting of the wrists, and that was the episode of Family Guy where his wrists, where he basically cuts off his hands, I think, in that episode.
That's right.
Or how about the synchronicity of Brian the dog dying on Family Guy, either the week of or the week before Paul Walker dies in a car crash, and his character's name was Brian in the Fast and the Furious, and Brian the dog was hit by a car. Brian, the Paul Walker character, dies in a car crash, and it's all basically within a week of that Family Guy episode airing, right? There's this nature of synchronicity, which again is a universal consciousness that's involved. Now that gets more esoteric, and that's really fun to talk about. There's also the issue of Dean pointed up, which is child abuse, monarch mind control programming. You see it in people like Beyonce, where it's maybe breaking down and they start to go into like these kind of hypnotic regression moments. And obviously, she's an overt candidate for it because she talks about her alternate personality, the Sasha Fierce character, person that comes out, or the, Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana duality. This is what Monarch was about creating these splits in the person, because the idea of the artist, as far as the artist we see on the screen, the actor, the musician, is that they're basically supposed to be a puppet for whatever force these Satanists, or usually Satanists, but again, these magicians want to put into that person. And that's a very powerful thing, as the people like Heath Ledger, I think, probably died from the effects of it, because sometimes those entities don't leave you, and you can conjure something so powerful it overtakes you, it overtakes your life. And I think actors understand some aspect of it. Some people get it more than others. Some people just think it's psychological, what's called psyche. But again, we just don't fully understand the nature of mind. And the fact is, mind control that was experimented upon by the government as MK Ultra, right? I really think harkens back to what's in this movie Imitation Game, where what they were breaking, what the British were breaking in terms of the German coding. They called that program Ultra, right? Which was to decrypt the German coding. And why is that Ultra then gets brought over to the US in the form of mind control Ultra, which is like a merging of the German mind control techniques that were practiced at Auschwitz and the concentration camps, right, by these Nazis, Mengele and others. And it's merged with the Ultra programming, which is Ultra is how do you decode the mind? How do you use techniques, Pavlovian techniques and others, to try to figure out how the mind works and how to then be basically one step ahead of it or trick it. And again, we know that some of these tricks, hypnosis, can make people not see someone, for example, or believe you're a bird, or whatever it is, the implant. So there's this tremendous project that was called MK Ultra that we know almost nothing about as the general public. Most of those documents were destroyed. From what we do know, it's pretty horrendous and scary. But we can't fathom how much the government came to understand the mind, control over the mind, and the relationship, the nexus between the spiritual realm and the psyche. And that's really what's being deployed, I believe, en masse via the mainstream media today.
My producer, Les, has just texted me 5 times. Skinwalker Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch. So who wants to take it first?
Oh, that's all Sean.
Okay, Sean, there you go.
Well, what about it?
Well, I mean, okay. I actually did a show here where Steve Murillo, Dean, you know Steve. I don't know, Sean, I don't know if you know Steve from MUFON here in L.A., but Steve Murillo and Alex Mastretta, another author, went up to Skinwalker, and we did a live show with them at the ranch. And our interest of it is deep. I don't know exactly what's going on up there. I think Bigelow knows something, and that's why he bought the property. But so the question is, coming from Les, that you know something. So what is it that you know that we don't?
No, honestly, I don't know enough about Skinwalker Ranch. I tried to get Bigelow to talk about it, obviously on Conspiracy Theory last season. Having been there briefly, I really didn't spend nearly enough time at the ranch. I wish I could have gone on the property and, seen more. Yes, I believe what I've been told, and what, it seems to be a pretty active spot. It seems to be some kind of, what they call like a portal, whether how do you say how active the portal now is, whether or not there's an underground alien base there, I don't know that, but it does seem to be a hotbed for interdimensional activity. And that's really all I could say about it. I think Bigelow definitely has done a lot of experiments there. The truth is, he said to me what you saw on the show, where I asked him, I said, look, you've done all those experiments. You brought all these scientists here to try to understand the interdimensional nature of the alien phenomenon, right? And this goes back, Skinwalker goes back to the Native Americans who believe this place was what they would have termed haunted by the Skinwalker, but some kind of extra dimensional beings, right, that would come through here. And Bigelow basically flatly said, I'll never reveal to the public what we have discovered or looked at or researched here. So, I can't.
Well, that says it all. That kind of answer, just that answers everything. It puts everything on the table. Either you deny it but if you do the dance, you know what I'm saying? That's it. We had there was a small convenience store down the road from Skinwalker. And the kid that worked on that, his name was Harley. I'll never forget it. We got him on the show. And I said, this is live. And I said, so, Harley, what goes on? Everything, man. You name it. Everything goes on up here. And he told us all kinds of stories about the dogs without legs and the red eyes and
really?
And UFOs. And
had he seen all this?
All of it. Him and his family going back generations. And you know what? Seriously, Sean, it was not that big of a deal. It was.
It was back to the beginning of the program, man. When you asked me, like, what is it like if you're growing up with Oliver Stone? It's like, look, you know what? If it's nature and it's also nurture, right? What we're surrounded by as kids, how we're normalized and conditioned, right? So for me, it's like, okay, that's my worldview. That's my father. That's natural for me. This kid growing up around Skinwalker Ranch, you know what? You deal with these far out sightings and phenomenon. That's their reality. Guess what? You grow up in a ritualistic family that deals with ancient secrets or satanic rituals. Guess what? That's normal to you. So
right.
Why this is difficult to figure out this planet and what's really going on here.
Totally. Okay. Hey, thank you guys. Now let's just jump forward a little bit. Conscious Life is February 6th. You two are presenting there. What are you guys going to be talking about?
Well, we're going to be talking about an assortment of things similar to what we talked about today. Kind of, I think our workshop's called Conspiracy Reality. Kind of Project Monarch, covers some JFK, kind of the stuff that Sean's into. And current events, I'm going to offer solutions, talk about localization and media propaganda. So it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Every time we get together, it's pretty fun. So I think people that come to the Conscious Life Expo, which I've loved, they're going to have a really good time, especially at our workshop. So, and we're going to do Q&A too. We're going to have high resolution pictures on the projector behind us. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Sean, anything you want to add to that real quick? No, I'm going to cut you off. You don't have to answer. Dean, you did a great job. Who chooses what's going to happen on Buzzsaw? Whose vision is that?
That's mine.
That's all you, Sean?
I choose the guests, and there's no script.
Okay. This show. It's just like this show.
Yeah, exactly. It's just raw questions and answers and, conversation.
And the one last question before I let you go. When you're at Conscious Life and you two are running around, now that Buzzsaw is behind you and conspiracy theory is behind you, when people come up to you, do they want to talk about your dad, or do they actually want, something happened to me? They want to talk to you about and get answers out of you. I mean, and what do you do to combat that? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
They actually want to talk to Dean's father.
That's true. I can attest to that.
Yes, exactly. And that's largely because they're not sure if he's over 18. And
he's a great guy.
Oh man!
As for me, I try to steer clear of the weirdos and the psychos. But I'm always open to a good story if you got one.
I can't wait to see you guys. Hey, Dean, you are over 18, right?
Well, no, actually, today I am. It's my birthday today, so I am. No joke. And then, I am over 18. Finally, I could buy that porno magazine that I've been waiting for.
Right on. Well, I'll be seeing you guys here in a couple of weeks out of Conscious Life. We'll have a good time. I will be at your presentation, and then we'll go knock a couple back at the bar. All right?
Oh,
sounds
please.
good. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, Dean. And, Sean, I'll talk to you off of the air. I'm going to tell you a story about me and your dad. You're going to crack up. And I'll talk to you guys later. All right? Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy.
See you, Dean.
See you later.
Thank you so much. Wow. And Conscious Life Expo is February 6th. It's out here in Los Angeles at the Hilton at LAX. It's 3 days long. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I will be there Friday and Saturday. I will be there for the presentations on Ancient Aliens. I invite everybody to come out, by the way. Mike Barra, Jim Mars will be in on that. And then, of course, George Norrie is going to be hosting on Saturday night. And so I will be there for both days, and I will be there for Dean and Sean's presentation as well. So I invite everybody to come out February 6th, Conscious Life Expo. If you need any information on that, you can go to consciouslifeexpo.com, tickets and so forth. But if you are going to be in Los Angeles, you definitely want to be at Conscious Life February 6th. With that, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Annie Jacobsen. What a great night tonight on Fade to Black. Coming up next, the unexplained and expanded perspectives. I got it in, Keith. I got it in. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Special thanks to Annie Jacobsen, Stean Stone, and Dean Ryan. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show's produced by Hilton J. Palm, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Viteau, Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Method of Signaling. Music is Doug Aldrich. Intro by Spaceboy of spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll see you tomorrow night right here, 7 o'clock live. Everybody be safe. See ya.